One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 101-120. Chapter 101 Please help Fishman Island. Do you have a daughter? Zhang Yang's voice just fell. Not only Neptune and Princess Yiji, but even Bernie on the side couldn't help but a strange look flashed in his eyes. He couldn't help but muttered in his heart, this Major Zhang Yang, will not was it the idea of a Fishman Island princess. Although it seems that the current mermaid princess has not yet been born. Neptune and Princess Yiji looked at each other, and both saw vigilance in each other's eyes. After all, this sentence of publicity is too easy to be misunderstood. Fortunately, Zhang Yang is not the kind of idiot with a single brain. He noticed the changes in the expressions of Neptune and Princess Itoji, and Bernie's strange eyes, and immediately understood. With a helpless smile, Zhang Yang explained, Princess Yiji, King Neptune, don't get me wrong, I don't mean anything in particular, but I often hear the legend of the mermaid princess at sea, so I'm just curious. Hearing Zhang Yang's explanation, Bernie's strange eyes were withdrawn, and Neptune and Princess Itoji were relieved at the same time. There are indeed many legends of mermaid princesses at sea, and it is not surprising that Zhang Yang would ask this. Actually, we don't have a daughter yet. If you want to see the mermaid princess, I'm afraid you will be disappointed by Major Zhang Yang. Princess Yiji said apologetically. It's nothing, I can't force this kind of thing. Zhang Yang waved his hand and smiled, and at the same time, a strange color flashed in his eyes imperceptibly. Did he really have no idea about the mermaid princess, the future Princess Shirahoshi? Obviously, this is impossible. Of course, it doesn't refer to Shirahoshi's beauty or the like, but Shirahoshi's ability to dominate the Sea King class, enough to completely subvert the sea, the power of an ancient weapon called Sea King Poseidon. In the original work, only the exposed part of iceberg can see the terrible ability of this kind of ability. If Zhang Yang can hold it in his hands, it will definitely play a very important role in his future plans. But now, it seems that Shirahoshi hasn't been born yet, and Zhang Yang can only give up this idea temporarily. By the way, Major Zhang Yang, I would like to take the liberty to ask, is there any mission for you to go to Mermaid Island this time? At this time, Neptune couldn't help but ask. This was what he was most worried about all the time. If something happened to someone like Zhang Yang who came to Fishman Island, it would be really troublesome. Hearing this, Princess Yiji, who was beside her, glared at Neptune, as if she was saying, don't talk too much, which made Neptune shrink his neck. Zhang Yang's thoughts can be seen more or less, so Zhang Yang has nothing to hide, and said with a smile, actually, there is no task, this time to Fishman Island is purely to see this undersea paradise style, and then go to the new world. So it is. Neptune breathed a sigh of relief. Princess Yiji glared at Neptune again, and then with a soft smile on her face, she said to Zhang Yang, Major Zhang Yang, what do you think of Fishman Island? It's very beautiful, it's very good. Zhang Yang recalled and nodded and smiled. Thank you for your compliment. Princess Otoji nodded with a smile, then the smile on her face faded a little, and she said with a low expression, but Major Zhang Yang, the Fishman Island you see now was a hell on earth, a few years ago. Quote. How do you say that? Zhang Yang raised his brows and said, but he couldn't help but wonder why concubine Yiji suddenly said this. Princess Otohi's ideal of wanting the peaceful coexistence of Fishman Island and human beings is naturally clear. Now Princess Otohime suddenly talks about this topic, and Bernie disclosed his information to Otohime before. Princess and others, could it be that Princess Yiji intends to let herself help her realize her ideal? A glimmer of light flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. If this is the case, then he has to think about it. Let Fishman Island go to the sea to live on the sea, and let human beings change their views and attitudes towards Fishman and the mermaid. How many? However, the power of Mermaid Island cannot be ignored. If he can obtain the power of Mermaid Island, it will definitely play a very important role in changing marine. Zhang Yang thought to himself, and Princess Yiji continued to speak. For a long time, Fishman Island has been discriminated against by humans. Pirates and human traffickers wantonly do evil on Fishman Island and even capture mermaids. People on Fishman Island live in fear and anxiety almost every day. Time can be said to be the most unwilling time for Fishman Island to recall, and even now, Fishman Island has temporarily restored peace, but human attitudes towards Fishman or Merman have not changed much. Even now, no Fishman or mermaid dares to go to the human world. Quote. Princess Otoji said with a low expression. She did not mention that Marine also participated in the capture of Merman and that Mermaid Island is now protected by Whitebeard, but even if Princess Otoji didn't mention it, Zhang Yang, who was a transmigrator, was already fully aware of it. At the same time, Zhang Yang is almost certain. It seems that Princess Itoji really intends to let him help Fishman Island realize the ideal of coexisting with human beings. Otherwise, Princess Itoji has absolutely no reason not to mention that Marine also participated in the mutilation of Fishman Island. And the fact that Whitebeard has made Fishman Island his own. However, knowing, Zhang Yang didn't show anything on his face. He quietly looked at Princess Yi, as if waiting for her to continue talking, while Bernie looked a little puzzled. After all, he is not everything. The traversers who know it are completely clueless about the current situation. Oji. Aside, Nipton wanted to say something, but looking at Princess Yiji's somewhat stubborn eyes, he could only helplessly shake his head and sigh, and did not continue to speak. Upon seeing this, Princess Eiji cast a thankful look at Neptune, then looked at Zhang Yang, paused and said seriously, in my opinion, whether it is Fishman, mermaid or human, in fact, they are all precious lives, and this mutual hostility will only cause unnecessary bloodshed and sadness in the end, so I have thought this way more than once since a long time ago. The mutual hostility between Fishman Island and humans can disappear. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to coexist peacefully? But my power is limited, and Ryagujo's power is limited. The hatred between humans and humans for hundreds of years will not disappear so easily, and we also need the cooperation of humans. Having said this, Princess Itoji suddenly stood up, bowed deeply to Zhang Yang, lowered her head and pleaded, Major Zhang Yang, I know your position in Marine. If you can help, Fishman the island will one day be able to coexist peacefully with human beings, living under the true sunshine. I am here to beg you on behalf of Fishman Island, please help Fishman Island. Quote. Oji. Nipton looked at Princess Yiji in a daze, then looked solemn, and also bowed to Zhang Yang, said solemnly, Major Zhang Yang, please help Fishman Island. Chapter 102 Feet Sledgehammer, Dick. Clear blue sky, white clouds, and warm and soft sunlight should be taken for granted, but for the residents of Fishman Island, it is the most satisfying sacred thing, guided by the huge sun tree. The coming sunlight is called, the grace of the sun, by them. It can be seen from this that everything above the sea is what they yearn for Fishman Island, but because of the rejection of human beings, they have to hide under the deep sea of 10,000 meters to survive. Fishman Island, Waterwheel Street. Zhang Yang is holding a flowing blade in his left hand, his justice coat swaying as he walks, walking here with a contemplative look. Next to him is this time with him accompanying Major Bernie. All kinds of mermaids, fishmen, and extremely rare human beings pass by on Watermill Street, and they will all cast their eyes on the two of them. Major Zhang Yang, are you still thinking about that? Walking aimlessly on the street, always paying attention to Zhang Yang's thoughtful Bernie hesitating, he still couldn't help but say, Major Zhang Yang, although these words are not suitable for me, I still want to as a reminder, the phenomenon of mutual hostility between Fishman Island and humans has been going on for hundreds of years. It is even more difficult to make humans and Fishman Island peacefully coexist. Although this is the request jointly made by King Dun and Princess Itoji, please consider it carefully before making a decision. Quote. Hearing Bernie's words, Zhang Yang suddenly recovered from his thoughts, looked at Bernie with a serious face, paused, shook his head and chuckled, do I look like such a sloppy person? Don't worry, things are I can still distinguish the severity of it, and what to do is my own conclusion. Quote. If that's the case, then I won't say more. Hearing this, Bernie was relieved and nodded, and didn't ask any more questions. Seeing this, Zhang Yang on the side pondered in his heart. Several hours have passed since the end of the banquet in the Dragon Palace city. Zhang Yang did not agree or refuse the request of Princess Yiji and Nipton. He just said that he would consider it, and then left Dragon Palace city with Bernie. After all, this is a problem related to the survival relationship between the two races, and it cannot be solved by pure force, so even if it is publicity, it must be carefully considered. Therefore, while wandering around Fishman Island, Zhang Yang has been considering the pros and cons of it all the time. It was not until Bernie spoke just now that Zhang Yang had an answer in his heart. It is impossible to trace back when it started. Humans regard Fishman and Merman as fish, and do not regard them as equal life. This idea has been completely rooted in humans' mind. After hundreds of years, humans and Fishman Island can be said to have reached the point of mutual exclusion and hostility. In this case, if you want these two races to give up their old hatred and reunite, as Bernie just said, it is simply better than getting to the sky is hard. However, if Zhang Yang really does it, there is no doubt that Zhang Yang can be said to be the savior of Fishman Island. As long as Zhang Yang gives an order, as long as it is not a completely unreasonable request, Fishman Island will definitely obey Zhang Yang. Yes, Shirahoshi, who was born in the near future, not to mention, definitely belongs to Zhang Yang. With the help of the ancient weapon Sea King, it is absolutely very easy to change Marine, and there is no need to worry about the obstruction of the world government. And once the Marine is changed, the result is self-evident. Marine is absolutely equivalent to the force of publicity. With the help of Marine, it is not impossible for Fishman Island to coexist peacefully with humans. Therefore, after some consideration, Zhang Yang decided to help Fishman Island achieve peaceful coexistence with humans. However, how to carry out the action, this should be thought carefully. While walking, Zhang Yang touched his chin with his empty right hand and muttered to himself. Major Zhang Yang, what did you say just now? Bernie turned his head strangely. Oh, I'm trying to remove the barrier between Fishman Island and humans. What should I do? Zhang Yang pondered and said casually. What? Hearing this, Bernie couldn't help exclaiming, and then seeing the countless strange eyes around him, he pushed his glasses and coughed, stopped, and looked at Zhang Yang in a lower voice in disbelief. Zhang Yang Major, do you really intend to agree to them? The hostile relationship between humans and Mermaid Island has lasted for so long, and this cannot be solved by pure force. Of course I understand this. Don't worry, I have my own decision. Zhang Yang didn't explain much, waved his hand, and then accelerated his pace and walked forward, where a loud noise came over, as if something had happened. But Bernie immediately planned to say something, but seeing that Zhang Yang didn't intend to say more about speeding up his pace, he could only helplessly sigh, followed, thinking in his heart that he would have to contact the headquarters later to put this matter. Report it. Gertrude, this is a square located not far northwest of Watermill Street. On weekdays, except for occasional important events, there are basically not many people here. However, today, unlike the usual compared with the tranquility, it is a little noisy here. Bang! A gunshot resounded over Gilcred Square, along with a terrified shout and a wild laugh. In the bright sunshine, everything on the square is clearly visible. On the wide square, a sturdy man with a height of nearly 3 meters was carrying a large exaggerated hammer and stepped on a fish man laughing wildly. A large group of wicked men numbering in the hundreds, all with malicious smiles on their faces, the one closest to the burly man even held a pistol to the sky, with white smoke rising from the muzzle. Obviously, he fired the gun just now. In front of this ferocious group of vicious elements, a group of 50 or 60 fishmen were standing together with a look of horror. Although their eyes were full of anger and unwillingness, it was only due to the gap in strength between the two sides, but no matter what. Dare to come forward. When Zhang Yang and Bernie came here, they just saw this scene. Those are pirates. Bernie couldn't help frowning when he looked at the ferocious men, and Zhang Yang raised his brows as he glanced at a beautiful woman with a frightened face among the fishmen. Mermaid, probably guessed something. Aren't these pirates afraid of Whitebeard? Glancing at a huge Whitebeard pirate's flag planted in the center of the square, Zhang Yang couldn't help thinking in his heart. Although there are no 4 emperors yet, Whitebeard's prestige has long been known to the sea. With Whitebeard's protection, basically no pirates dare to go to Fishman Island to do evil, but these pirates seem to be afraid at all. Could it be that, in fact, this group of pirates who are not good looking is actually very strong? But it's not like. Glancing at the giant man with a big hammer on his back, Zhang Yang rubbed his chin and muttered. At this time, the burly man also moved. Trash, this is the fate of violating Lao Su. Who do you think Lao Su is? Lao Su is the captain of the Hammer Pirates, and the big hammer, Dick, with a reward of 88 million Baileys. Stepping on the groaning fishman under his feet, the pirate captain named Dick looked at the frightened mermaid and laughed wildly, and then looked at the beautiful mermaid surrounded by fishman. With a flash of greed in his eyes, Tien pouted and said, I'll give you one last chance, hand over that mermaid immediately, otherwise. With that said, Dick stretched out his hand to hold the hammer behind him, whipped a semicircle in the air and smashed it hard on the ground beside him. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the gravel splashed, and a powerful force directly smashed a big hole on the ground, which suddenly made the fishman scream, and they all stepped back in fright. The mermaid, with a delicate face, it was even more frightening that Vivi turned white, and the other pirates laughed jokingly. Major Zhang Yang. Seeing this scene, Bernie couldn't help frowning. No matter where he is, as long as he sees pirates doing evil, he can't just sit back and ignore it as a marine, but it's not him who is commanding this marine now, so Bernie, after hesitating for a while, he looked at Zhang Yang. Seeing this, Zhang Yang nodded. Since he has decided to help Fishman Island, he still has to take care of these matters. Seeing Zhang Yang nodding, Bernie's face suddenly turned solemn. He pushed his glasses and walked out, shouting at the same time, "Stop it all for me." Chapter 103 Ghost Fire. Instantly kill Dick. Dick is very excited now, because he is now doing what almost all pirates dare not do, looting Merman on Whitebeard's territory, Fishman Island. Looking at the beautiful merman shivering among those garbage fishmen, Dick's greed looked even more, because he had already negotiated with a human trafficker. As long as he can catch a merman, he will get 100 million shells profit, 2 is 200 million. As long as he can catch a few more, he can obtain an incomparably huge wealth. As for what to do with the Whitebeard pirates' revenge, Dick had already prepared in his heart. He had already decided that as long as he made a lot of money this time, he would take their brethren out of the Great Waterway and enjoy the mischief life. Whitebeard pirates are indeed powerful, but the world is so big, as long as he breathes to avoid, no matter how powerful the Whitebeard pirates are, they can't help him at all. Therefore, although he is doing what countless pirates call suicide, Dick is not worried at all. He believes that as long as he waits for others to move quickly, he will leave without waiting for the Neptune army to react. Waiting for them is definitely a bright future. However, just as he was thinking of this, a shout made him unable to help his expression. Vivi. Stop me all. An imposing shout resounded in the square, and the square couldn't help but be silent. Whether it was Fishman, Mermaid, or Dick and other pirates, they all turned their heads and saw a middle-aged man wearing glasses. Year Marine was walking towards them with a serious face, and not far behind him, another Marine who was much younger was standing there and watching. They are Zhang Yang and Bernie. Marine. Seeing Zhang Yang and Bernie, Dick and Fishman reacted differently. Fishman's faces showed some hopeful expressions one by one. Although everyone on Fishman Island subconsciously believed that human beings were terrible, they had also heard of Marine, who maintained the same protection as the Neptune army. The troops of order and peace. Now the Neptune army has no time to rush over, they can only pin their hopes on the human Marine. As for Dick and the others, they panicked one by one, and even Dick, the captain, couldn't help but change Vivi's expression. To say that what pirates are most afraid of is not a powerful enemy, nor an unknown danger, but the Marine that is flooded all over the world, a huge number, almost unmatched power, except for a very small number of Marines that are powerful to a certain extent. Thief, no pirate is not afraid of Marine. Therefore, the moment they saw Zhang Yang and Bernie, Dick and others panicked. Captain, it's Marine, what shall we do? Damn it. Why does Fishman Island have Marine? Doesn't it mean that Marine has not been to Fishman Island in recent years? Captain, why don't we retreat first? Marine's here, and it won't be good if the Neptunes come too. The pirates suddenly looked at Dick in a panic. Dick's face became more and more serious. He glanced at Bernie who came over and Zhang Yang in the distance, and then glanced at my place at the entrance of the square, and his expression stopped. A cruel smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Boom! The sledgehammer slammed into the ground again, and as the ground cracked, countless cracks in the spider webs spread. Idiots! Shut me up! Dick roared, and the pirates suddenly quieted down. They looked at their captain Dick with some horror, and Dick's grin was even worse. After glancing at his subordinates, he looked at the uncle who came over. Nihayuan grinned and said without any movement, "See clearly, they are just two people. As long as they are resolved, it will not have any impact on our actions at all. Remind me, whoever resolves them, I'll let whoever be the cadre." Hearing Dick's words, the pirates were stunned for a moment and looked at Bernie and Zhang Yang, only to realize that there were only two of them. A malicious smile appeared on their faces immediately, and then they rushed towards Bernie frantically. "Past. Just two people, I'll deal with them. Let me come. The position of the cadre is mine." "What nonsense, I will solve them before all of you. I will not give the position of cadre to anyone. I'm the cadre." While shouting, the pirates rushed towards Bernie, and the momentum of hundreds of people running together suddenly made those fishmons nervous. There are only two Marines, but there are hundreds of pirates. Can they really be saved? These guys. And looking at the pirates rushing towards him, Bernie's face couldn't help but become extremely serious. These pirates don't seem to be some kind of miscellaneous fish. Zhang Yang couldn't help but frown, and sure enough, there is basically no incompetent person who can go to the end of the first half of the Great Waterway. There are so many people, plus the captain who seems to have some strength. Let the uncle, it might be really difficult for me to deal with them alone. After a pause, Zhang Yang shook his head, moved his feet, and instantly appeared beside Bernie, looking at the pirates and said, "Major Bernie, these pirates don't seem to be ordinary people, let me go too." Hearing Zhang Yang's voice suddenly, Bernie was stunned for a while, only then did he realize that Zhang Yang had come to his side, and while secretly shocked by Zhang Yang's speed, he nodded. He also understands that he is not a fighting talent. Even if he is a major of the headquarters, his combat power is not necessarily higher than that of the major of the branch. In addition, he is not an arrogant person, so naturally he will not refuse. The scene of Zhang Yang suddenly appearing beside Bernie was naturally seen by the pirates, but at this time these pirates had already been dazzled by the cadre's lure, and they didn't take it to heart at all, and they still rushed over. However, Dick, who saw this scene, was slightly condensed. "This kid, it's not easy." Dick stared at Zhang Yang tightly, tightened the big hammer in his hand, paused, stepped on, followed the pirates and charged towards Bernie and Zhang Yang. Major Zhang Yang. Noticing that Dick also acted, Bernie's expression suddenly changed. Just as he was about to say something, Zhang Yang nodded as if he already knew, and said, "I'll deal with that guy first. You hold them back first, don't force it." After speaking, Zhang Yang didn't wait for Dick to react, he stepped on his foot hard, and disappeared in an instant, the next moment. So fast. Dick, who had been paying attention to Zhang Yang's movements, had a big change in his face. He watched Zhang Yang rush through his men at an unimaginable speed, and without any hesitation, the big hammer in his hand slammed forward fiercely. Smashed over. Boom. A violent wave of air slammed out, and in the huge roar, Zhang Yang's figure appeared in front of Dick, and the flowing blade Ruahuo in his hand had been pulled out at some point, and slammed into the big hammer. The powerful force instantly collapsed the ground, and countless cracks spread. Drink. Dick let out a loud shout again. His hands holding the sledgehammer slammed hard, and with a boom, the strong air wave spread out again, and Zhang Yang's body was indeed unbearable under this powerful force. Taking a few steps back, he shook his numb arm, and a hint of helplessness flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. It seemed that in terms of pure strength, he was still slightly worse. It seems that I have to find some time to continue exercising my body, he muttered to himself, but his face didn't change. When he saw Zhang Yang being repulsed by his own blow, Dick was relieved. It seemed that this kid was not particularly strong, and he could handle it himself. A sinister smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Dick stared at Zhang Yang with disgusting eyes and said, "Little devil, stay at home quietly if you have no strength. Don't think that everyone is afraid of Marine, this uncle." A lot of nonsense. Before Dick's words were finished, Zhang Yang couldn't help but said with a bit of annoyance, and then he moved his feet and disappeared instantly at a higher speed than before, and then appeared on top of Dick's head, and the flowing blade in his hand was flaming. It has been sheathed, and the end of the scabbard is stabbed at the big hammer below. Scabbard. Dick Vivi was stunned for a moment, then sneered. Although the big hammer in his hand was huge, it blocked the top of his head with super fast speed, and said a little unhappily, "Little devil, you are too conceited." Ghost fire. Okay, a light drink from Zhang Yang interrupted Dick's words, and the next moment, the end of the scabbard of the flaming blade stabbed the big hammer fiercely. Frame. A dull metal sound came out, and the big hammer in Dick's hand shook violently with his body. Dick stared blankly ahead, opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but before he could say it, his eyes gradually lost his mind. With a great look, the huge body and the big hammer smashed to the ground. Under the sunlight, it could be clearly seen that a fist-sized hole appeared there on the sledgehammer, Dick's head, and even on the ground, and strong spiritual pressure fluctuations emanated from it. On the side, the fish man looked at this scene in disbelief. The pirates who had previously made them powerless to resist even those who were born with 10 times the strength of humans died just like that. Okay, it's amazing. After being stunned for a moment, excited cheers rang out from the mouths of the fish man. Chapter 104 Take off Whitebeard's flag. It's amazing. Such a strong pirate was killed so quickly. As this Marine, it doesn't look strong at all, but it's even stronger than the Neptune army. White. Idiot. What are you talking about? Even Marine, they are human beings. You even praise them. Have you forgotten how scary humans are? But, weren't they the one who saved us just now? Looking at Dick lying on the ground and Zhang Yang beside him, the fishmons screamed in surprise one by one, and the eyes looking at Zhang Yang were suddenly filled with various colors. There was shock, reverence, gratitude, and, of course, some wary and complicated glances. And Zhang Yang didn't even look at these fishmen at all. He glanced at Dick, who had been completely pierced by Reiki from beginning to end, and then looked at those who were supposed to fight Dick, but instead used the pirates who looked at him in shock and horror. Although the battle between Zhang Yang and Dick only lasted a few tens of seconds, the powerful momentum and the exclamations of the fishmons made them unresponsive. They turned their heads subconsciously one by one, just to see Zhang Yang's last when the ghost fire killed Dick. All the pirates couldn't help but shrink their pupils, their faces full of horror. They don't know when Zhang Yang crossed them and started fighting with Captain Dick, and they don't want to know. They only know one thing now, and that is that their captain, Dick, is dead. Bernie also looked at Zhang Yang in shock. Due to the direction, all the process of Zhang Yang's battle with Dick was in his eyes, but because of this, he could understand Zhang Yang's power more clearly. 2 rounds, just 2 rounds. The pirate who was powerful enough to wield such a big hammer recklessly was solved by Zhang Yang without any resistance. The name of the so-called ghost is really not cover it. At this time, the pirates also recovered from the defeat of Captain Dick, glanced at Zhang Yang, and the color of fear in his eyes was even more, and ran out of the square with a horrified scream of a pirate. All the pirates immediately dispersed and ran out of the square. After all, Captain Dick is the highest combat power of their pirate ship. An opponent that Captain Dick can't beat how can they beat it? Therefore, without any hesitation, all the pirates chose to escape. Stop! Don't run! Seeing this, Bernie frowned, but just as he was about to catch up, Zhang Yang's voice came over. Major Bernie, stop chasing, contact the Neptune army, and let them handle this kind of thing. Zhang Yang said softly as he walked towards Bernie. Hearing the words, Bernie thought for a while, and nodded, and acted aggressively on Fishman Island. Given the current situation of Fishman Island and humans, it is really not suitable, so it is better to leave it to the Neptune army to deal with it. Understood, then I will inform Dragon Palace now. Bernie nodded, then took out the phone bug that Nipton had given him earlier from his arms, and connected the Ryaguchung special line. Not far away, the fishman looked hesitant. Originally, they should have stepped forward to thank Zhang Yang for saving them, but Marine, who is a human, has always been taught that humans are terrible. They hesitated for a while. Zhang Yang naturally also paid attention to the fishman's performance, but he didn't care, because his attention at this time was all on a flag planted on the rock wall above the exit of the square. It was a huge pirate flag. On the black flag, there was a white skeleton with a crescent-shaped beard, and behind the skeleton was a cross-shaped skeleton. Zhang Yang is naturally very familiar with this pirate flag, because this is the pirate group of the famous New World, known as the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard. Flag. Looking at the flag fluttering in the wind, he opened his mouth with a tick, and couldn't help but let out a somewhat sarcastic laughter. Of course, he is not laughing at the Whitebeard pirates, but at the current Marine. Marine used absolute justice all day long, claiming to protect the whole world from pirates, but what's the truth? Marine was also involved in the killing of Fishman Island, and finally the evil pirates had to protect it to keep Fishman Island safe. He didn't know what other people in Marine thought, but in Zhang Yang's view, this was definitely a great irony for Marine. For Zhang Yang, who wants to change Marine in the future, he absolutely cannot tolerate such a thing. Marine, do what Marine is supposed to do. What's more, he has decided to help Fishman Island's sites be truly peaceful. I think I know what to do. Muttering to himself, Zhang Yang looked at Whitebeard's flag, a gleam of light flashed in his eyes, and then suddenly stepped on his feet. The whole person rose into the sky, and rushed towards Whitebeard's flag. Major Zhang Yang. Bernie, who had just hung up the phone, turned his head, only to feel a flash in front of his eyes, and was stunned for a moment, then turned to look at Zhang Yang who was soaring into the sky, his face full of doubts, not knowing what Zhang Yang was doing. Flying. That Marine is flying. Those fishmen who hadn't left also saw this scene, and suddenly exclaimed one by one, but soon, their faces became horrified one by one. Because while they were watching, Zhang Yang had come straight to the flag of the Whitebeard pirates, stretched out his hand to grab the flag, and vomited out the spiritual power in his body. Hiss. The sound of the cloth being torn rang out, and in the horrified eyes of the fishman and Bernie, the banner of the Whitebeard pirates instantly shattered, turning into pieces of debris and fluttering around in the wind. Tread. Zhang Yang's figure slowly fell from the sky, and pieces of debris fell from the top of his head. Except for the whirring of the wind, there was no sound around him. Bernie's eyes widened, the fishmonks opened their mouths and the place in Gilcred Square suddenly became eerily quiet. Until a certain moment. Whitebeard's flag was taken off by Marine. A fishman stared blankly at the empty rock wall and muttered, then his body shook violently, his face gradually showed a look of horror, and he shouted in horror, "Go and inform His Majesty the King and Neptune Army, Fishman Island. It's time to usher in the invasion of pirates." Chapter 105 Sheltered by Marine. There is a gorgeously decorated room in the Dragon Palace city. There are no guards in it, only a huge figure. This is a mermaid. Although her body is small, it is the size of an ordinary mermaid. She wears a fish-shaped hair accessory, bright blue eyes, a lovely face, and a pink fishtail. At this time, she is fast asleep. There was a shark that was also asleep beside him, but it was small and cute. Shirahoshi. At this moment, two figures were standing outside the door, looking at the mermaid inside through the window on the door. Otoji murmured in a low voice, then looked at Neptune next to him, and said worriedly, "You said, Major Zhongyang, Marine. Do you know about Shirahoshi's existence?" "Well, that's not a good idea, and his reason is valid, but anyway, let's guard against him. What if his purpose is to be detrimental to Shirahoshi?" Neptune paused and said solemnly, "It's been a long time since Marine has come. This time is an opportunity. If this man really promises us, then there will be great hope for coexistence." Otoji brushed the long hair in front of her forehead, and a strong light burst out from her eyes. "If it weren't for Whitebeard, I'm afraid." Before the words fell, Neptune frowned and looked behind him. A blue-skinned whale shark fish man soldier ran over in a panic. Before Neptune could speak, the soldier swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said anxiously, "King Neptune, Princess Itoji. That publicity tore off Whitebeard's flag." "What?" Both Neptune and Otoji changed their expressions, and immediately set off after being dumbfounded, and hurriedly walked towards the square. Whitebeard's flag was torn off. This matter can be said to be related to the survival of Fishman Island. Before Whitebeard arrives, all kinds of pirates will capture Fishman and Mermaid here, and then put on chains and use slaves. It was auctioned off because of his identity, and that was the period that Fishman Island was most reluctant to recall. But since Whitebeard came here and planted the flag of his pirate group in the center of Fishman Island, declaring that Mermaid Island was his territory, Fishman Island has ushered in unprecedented peace. Whitebeard's powerful strength and reputation, even if he covets this place in his heart, he still dare not go beyond the thunderous pool. But now, the newly arrived Colonel Marine has torn up the flag that symbolized peace. Neptune's face became more and more ugly. He couldn't imagine what tragic things would happen after the flag was torn down. Block the news network between Fishman Island and the outside world. Remember, this news must not flow into the sea. The moment he learned that Zhongyang tore off the pirate flag, Neptune immediately realized the tragic situation, and without hesitation, gave the order to the blue whale shark fishman soldier. On the other side, on the Gilcred Square, with the publicity tearing down the Whitebeard pirate flag, after the surrounding people were shocked, the dead silence passed, and the whole square was uproarious, and even many people were face to face. Desperate, Lou collapsed to the ground helplessly, and the shock, panic, roar, and abuse seemed to turn into a torrent and echoed directly over Fishman Island for a while. "No, Whitebeard's flag has been torn down. Could it be the day where I was scared all day before?" "Marine, what the hell do you mean? Do you know what Whitebeard's pirate flag symbolizes on Fishman Island? You Marines symbolize justice, but Fishman Island has ushered in peace under the protection of Whitebeard, but you, instead of doing the slightest thing, are now breaking the peace of our Fishman Island." Zhongyang looked at the scattered debris on the ground, raised his head slowly, looked at the residents of Fishman Island who surrounded him, and slowly closed his eyes when he heard various words from their mouths. Take a deep breath. Yes, the residents of Fishman Island were right. Where was Marine when Fishman Island was bullied, captured and killed by the pirates? He kept talking about where the righteous army was, but in the end, only the pirates could protect it from harm. The pirates hurt this place, but in the end, the pirates protected this place. Wouldn't it make people laugh out loud? Fishman Island, from now on. Taking a deep breath, Zhongyang opened his eyes and let out a voice wrapped in Reiki, above the noise, spreading everywhere, sheltered by Marine. The last few words are mixed with all the spiritual power in Zhongyang's body. Although Zhongyang is only one person, these words are clearly in the minds of every fishman and mermaid. Enduring. With the fall of Zhongyang's words, the noise suddenly stopped, and it returned to the dead silence before, a silence, only the sound of water flowing continuously, proving that time is still from time to time. Zhong. After Bernie was stunned for a moment, he came back to his senses, recalled the words just now, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and wanted to say something to the figure in front of him, but he just opened his mouth and was unable to say the next words. This sentence is so shocking that not only the people on Fishman Island, but Bernie, who is Marine, understands the seriousness of the tense. Zhang Yang is privately representing Marine, representing the world government, and publicly announcing an alliance with Fishman Island. There is no difference, if according to the law, Zhang Yang can even be executed directly without going through a military court. This matter is much more serious than the one in the illegal zone. Bernie took out the phone bug and was debating whether to report this matter to Marine headquarters, because the development of tenses was no longer within his control as a little major. However, Zhang Yang's following words attacked his mind, causing him to drop his raised hand holding the phone bug. Justice is defended by Marine. No matter where it is, as long as it is in this sea, we Marine have the obligation and responsibility to protect everyone's safety. From this moment on, Fishman Island no longer needs to be sheltered by pirates, we Marine. Doing what Marine is supposed to do. Bernie's eyes were complicated. After being silent, he took back the phone bug he took out and looked at Zhang Yang. At this moment, Zhang Yang seemed to have the temperament of a Marine leader in Bernie's eyes. Absolute justice temperament. Chapter 106 Engagement. Silence, eerie silence. What did this Marine say? He wants to protect Fishman Island. How is this possible? Isn't Marine just like the pirates, catching the villains that Fishman sells? In Gilcrude Plaza, the Fishmonks and the Mermaid Gate looked at the protagonist in disbelief. Although he was not big, he revealed a convincing power. Is he really Marine? Marine, stick to your justice. Fishman Island doesn't need pirate shelter. The last sentence uttered by Zhang Yang resounded in the hearts of all people, echoing constantly, and lasting for a long time. Impossible, who do you think you are? What right do you have to say that? A Fishman street gangster stepped forward and sneered. That's right. He's just a major. Can he represent the entire Marine? Another followed. Pulling the flag, are you going to declare war on Whitebeard? More and more questions rushed towards Bernie and Zhang Yang in the middle like a tide. This is the first time Bernie has encountered so many doubts. His face changed and he was a little embarrassed. He was about to take out the spear, but a pair of powerful hands held down his wrist where he raised the spear. You stay behind. Bernie was taken aback by Zhang Yang's words. Although he was puzzled, he didn't ask any questions and walked towards the distance. With Bernie's departure, Zhang Yang's right hand VV tightened, and in the tense expressions of everyone, a sword with a hilt of Dongfang Shozi appeared in Zhang Yang's right hand. The blade was bright and filled with special lines. The next moment, an extremely strong and oppressive momentum suddenly rose from Zhang Yang. With him as the center, this momentum quickly spread around. Pong, 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 pong. Almost in the blink of an eye, the crowd of Fishman Island surrounded Zhang Yang felt a strong pressure, as if there was a huge palm in the sky suppressing them. One after another, the mermaid and Fishman present were crushed to the ground, regardless of strength, and it was difficult to get up. They could only look at the figure in front of them with shock. This is Conqueror Hockey. Some people recognized the momentum released by Zhang Yang, and blurted out in horror. As soon as these words came out, they immediately caused ripples. Conqueror Hockey, only one in a million people. This major is by no means a simple character. Everything in the mountains is turned into ashes. The blades are like fire. Just like a chant, when the last word fell, the blade of the blade that fell on the fire seemed to vibrate invisibly, and then the next moment sparks surged, the flame erupted, and an extremely strong flame burst from the tip of the blade until it filled the air. After taking the entire blade, this is the end. Boom! Zhang Yang swiped the knife at will, and the flame on the knife suddenly rose and spread out in the next moment. In an instant, a sea of fire was formed, which surrounded all the people present. It kept surging, like the sudden explosion of a gunpowder keg. Unbridled. On the bottom of the sea, the flames burned like water and fire. Under this huge heat, the seawater evaporated violently, the heat was overwhelming, and everyone who was overwhelmed was soaked with sweat. You ask me, why do you speak like that, and I'll tell you. Zhang Yang lifted the flowing blade and dropped the fire. The blade wrapped in flames, pointed at everyone, hockey side leakage. Because, I am a strong man. Even if you oppose it, stand up to me in a fight. Because, I am a tyrant, with a conqueror hockey that is one of a million people. Because, I am the power, the peerless genius of the Marine headquarters, the future heir to the Marine Marshal. Are these 3 points enough? Zhang Yang's voice is like a bell. At this moment, no one dares to argue, and no one dares to make any sound. This is not only the effect of the Conqueror Reiki, but also because at this moment, Zhang Yang's momentum is unprecedentedly strong. Bernie watched the flame burning recklessly in the field, like a god descending, an omnipotent figure. His heart shook, and a faint sense of worship rose quietly. Even the original firm mermaid's mind was shaken. Looking at the way the handsome figure with the sparkling longsword flashed a bit of admiration in his heart. After a while, when Neptune and Princess Itoji came and saw this scene, their hearts surged, and they left Gilcred Plaza with Zhang Yang. Dragon Palace, indoors. Princess Otoji, King Neptune of Fishman, Minister of the Interior. Including Zhang Yang and Bernie all gathered at the conference table and had a heated discussion. What exactly it is, no one knows. But when they left the conference room, Zhang Yang's face was full of helplessness. He couldn't have imagined that. The mermaid princess was not only born, but also 4 years old. Everything that Princess Otoji said before was false, and the purpose was to protect the mermaid princess. And most importantly, in order to conclude a contract, he had to marry the mermaid princess to himself. But, the body shape doesn't match, and, how do you mate like this? When he thought of the scene where Hua Zuyi in the bridal chamber faced the mermaid princess who was comparable to a hill, he couldn't hug or kiss, and could only stare blankly. Zhang Yang felt a pain in the ass. Fortunately, his proposal was allowed, because the mermaid princess was too young, and the two were only engaged, not married. But this news also caused an uproar on Fishman Island. Major Marine is actually going to be engaged to the most honorable princess of Mermaid Island. No, humans and mermen are engaged. It's already very weird, and it's not justified in terms of species. But, this is indeed a good idea. Once married, Marine has no reason to suppress Fishman Island. The above are the views of ordinary citizens. Of course, there are also many female mermaids who are envious and jealous. But not all fish think that way, including Fishman street gangsters, Fishman pirates, and more. Humans are inferior creatures. Marine is a bunch of scum, not even a pirate. The mermaid princess must not be defiled. They must not be allowed to forge a covenant. Such thoughts were deeply ingrained in their minds. They hated publicity, hated Marine, and by the way they hated Dragon Palace City. For this reason, they gathered together in secret, prepared to discuss specific matters, and made up their minds not to let the royal family succeed, not to let Marine succeed, not to let Zhang Yang succeed. Chapter 107 Attacked. Fishman Island, deep in a coral clump. On a huge sunken ship, countless mermaids gathered. At the bow of the boat, 2 figures were standing at this time. Brother Arlong, in 3 days, the mermaid princess is going to marry that Marine. Do I need to shoot that Marine at that time? One of the great white sharks, Fishman, has curly hair, a flat hat with a trident pattern on his head, a wolf skin around his neck, and is dressed in the clothes of a Dragon Palace soldier. Fist clenched. And the other figure was naturally Arlong with a jagged nose and a sharp nose. Arlong looked at him and sneered, his face a little gloomy. Scare ha ha ha, Huo-di, that guy is not the one to be easy to mess with. If Jane it's easy to shoot, then I won't have a headache for it. Then are we going to abandon the operation? Huo-di's face changed and his voice increased. Huo-di, I want you to steal the murderous medicine. In front of him, our strength is not enough. Arlong Vidi shook his head, his cold pupils stared at Huo-di's eyes. Stealing murderous drugs. Huo-di was stunned for a moment, his face was very complicated, and he said, Brother Arlong, the poison is hidden in the palace. Although it can greatly improve the strength, it has great side effects, and it has been strictly prohibited by the royal family. If it is discovered, quote. Before he could speak, he was interrupted by a cold snort from Arlong, who od, our action this time is already a rebellion, don't you want to have a strong strength? Do you want to submit to Marine's rule? After we occupied Fishman Island, with our great strength, we can gallop across the sea and recklessly harvest human lives. Don't you think that coquettish blood is beautiful? Looking at each other, Huodi saw the bloodthirsty scarlet in Arlong's pupils. The next moment, he seemed to be infected. When the hatred for mankind broke out in his heart, Huodi laughed and showed his sharp teeth. Ja ha ha ha, Brother Arlong, when are we going to do it? If it is not necessary, we strive not to take action in person. If the plan is successful, the pressure of public opinion will even force the royal family to hand over power. Arlong's eyes shone with the eyes of a conspirator, and in this dark seabed, there was some horror. Some of the ministers in the palace also strongly disagreed with this matter. It just happened to help us. In addition, I will add fire to the masses, and it will only get worse. Huodi glanced at the fishman gathered on the deck behind him, and shouted, our strength has far surpassed that of the Dragon Palace guards. The royal family wants to form an alliance with Marine, do you agree? As soon as the voice fell, it seemed like a chain reaction had started. The fishman on the deck was full of enthusiasm, with a look of hatred and hatred. During the demonstration, the sound was like waves surging one after another. Overthrow the regime. Delusional alliance with human beings is not worthy of being a royal family. Disagree. 2 days later, there was chaos in the Dragon Palace, and the murderous medicine disappeared. This news made the Dragon Palace panic. After all, it was the engagement day of the Mermaid Princess and Colonel Marine. At this special moment, the disappearance of the murderous medicine means what it means, as long as you are not stupid. The day of engagement will not be peaceful. Even though the bodyguards, led by Shaxing, the first prince of the Dragon Palace Kingdom, continued to investigate, there was no news. The day of engagement is getting closer and closer. It was originally a great joy, but the day after the royal family announced their engagement, the atmosphere on Fishman Island became very strange, and there were some panicky noises coming from the streets and alleys. Discussion. It is said that after the engagement of the Mermaid Princess and Major Marine will fully rule Fishman Island. Also, which was listed as a banned drug by the royal family, is said to have disappeared, and I heard that it was given to Marine as a dowry. Oh my god, if that's the case, then we Fishman Island can't talk about freedom. Although it was the Marine who shredded Whitebeard's flag, the royal family was too abhorrent. Not only did they form alliances with humans, but they also intermarried. It's really a shame on our Fishman Island. You said, will we go back to the year? As time went on, this panic intensified. On the day before the engagement ceremony, there was a spontaneous parade on Fishman Island. In front of the Dragon Palace. Isn't it enough that humans hurt us? If Marine rules us here, what difference are we to slaves? Please take back your life, break the engagement, and give up the alliance. Voices like this kept resounding and reverberated outside the Dragon Palace. Even under these circumstances, there were constant visits from ministers in the Dragon Palace. Of course, some of them had ulterior motives, and some were sincere considerations. They were afraid that this matter would cause unrest in Man Island. However, it was obvious that the royal family had no intention of letting go. Until the middle of the night, seeing that the group of people had not left and still stayed in front of the Dragon Palace, Princess Yi couldn't bear it any longer. Under the protection of a large group of guards, she walked out of the Dragon Palace. As a princess, I promise that after forming a covenant with Marine, nothing to worry about will happen. After forming the alliance, we have the protection and acceptance of Marine, and we will gradually realize peaceful coexistence with human beings. At that time, we can live under the real sun, and we can go to a wider area without always staying on Fishman Island. The place. After talking bitterly for a long time, under the repeated assurances of Yi, everyone left. Princess Yi, you are so dangerous, what if these people start to move and hurt you? A strong blue-skinned whale shark fishman soldier ran to Princess Otahime, watched the backs of the parade leaving, and spoke with dissatisfaction with Princess Otahime, but before he finished speaking, his expression suddenly changed. Looked in the southeast direction, muttered at the corner of his mouth, and threw a punch directly. Tingsawa Zhengchen. When this punch was blasted, the air seemed to have ripples, and a 360-degree shock wave was generated in an instant, tyrannically heading towards the front with a breaking sound, and at this moment, a bullet the size of a pinky finger burst towards Otoji. Come. Chapter 108. Boom. The warhead that shot towards Yi was completely swallowed by the 360-degree shock wave, and then smashed into a stone pillar. During the explosion, the stone shattered and dust flew. Who? This sturdy whale shark fishman is Jinbei. Jinbei's face is gloomy. After punching out, he directly blocks the expression of Princess Otoji. At the same time, his eyes are rolling, and his eyes are constantly scanning around, trying to find out who the murderer is. The scene just now happened in a flash of light and flint, and even Eiji didn't notice it. When the stone pillar in the distance exploded and Jinbei shouted, she was surprised by Vivi, looked at the figure standing in front of her, a little puzzled. Jinbei, what's the matter? Princess Eiji, someone wanted to assassinate you, but I was blocked just now. The voice was very low, but when the guards around him heard it, their hearts roared and their bodies trembled. If Princess Eiji really had an accident, then they should not think about it better. Thinking of this, everyone in the guard team was afraid for a while. They surrounded Yi in 3 circles and 3 circles. At the same time, they raised their spears and looked vigilant. Looking around. Princess Yi, go back to the palace quickly. Ah. Jinbei said to Yi with some concern, but as soon as the words fell, a scream came from not far away. Everyone was stunned, including the crowd who were just about to leave, all stopped. At this moment, all around it was a moment of silence. Stomping on. There was a sound of heavy footsteps, and then a fishman who looked like a guard of the Dragon Palace walked out of a corner and appeared in front of this group of demonstrators. Not only that, but there was also a figure on the guard's long knife. It's just that the long knife pierced through his heart, and he obviously died of anger. It's this human. The guard's gloomy voice said slowly, and at the same time, he swung the long knife in his hand, and the pirate threw it away directly from the knife and smashed to the ground. The blood that had not yet solidified instantly dyed the ground red. 40. Don't. Jinbei was stunned for a moment, and the next moment, as if remembering something, he shouted, seeing that Huodi didn't mean to stop, his face suddenly became ugly. Gum Soul. When he was half squatting, he exerted force under his feet, and the ground split open. The moment Jinbei's body bounced, the ground under his feet suddenly dented, and then without hesitation, he shot towards Huodi, as if to stop Huodi from finishing his words. Shoot a shot at Princess Otahime. Huodi looked at Jinbei who was rushing towards him, a sinister smile overflowed from the corner of his mouth. When the voice spread, it echoed in all directions, and it fell into the ears of Fishman and the mermaid present. After a moment of sluggishness, there was a rumbling in my head. This human actually wanted to assassinate Princess Otahime. Sure enough, human beings are evil and dirty. Marine is also a human being, so it must be the same. Oh my god, I can't think about what will happen to our Fishman Island if it is ruled by humans in the future. In an instant, the emotions of the demonstration team that had been appeased by Princess Otoji broke out again, and it was even worse than before. The noise and dissatisfaction seemed to turn into a black cloud, falling over Fishman Island, making the entire island atmosphere as becoming more and more depressing. Damn it, Howard, do you know what you're doing? Jinbei was worried about happened, his face was full of anger, he clenched his fists, punched out, and directly smashed Huodi's figure to the ground, with such a force that even cracks appeared on the ground and sunk into it. Under the public eye, this human wants to assassinate Princess Otahime. Can't everyone on Fishman Island see it? Huodi wiped the blood spilling from the corner of his mouth, stood up with difficulty, patted the dust on his body, and said to Jinbei with a cold face this time. Jinbei snorted coldly, didn't say more, didn't even care about the culprit, and when looking at the group of high-spirited fishman and mermaid, he shouted, "Stop for me." The sound is like a bell, and the anger is towering. Once it appears, everyone who is making a noise here is stunned for a while, and they can't help but stop making a sound. Now disperse immediately, otherwise, the old man will detain you on the charge of gathering a crowd to make trouble, and think about it yourself. Having said that, Jinbei escorted Princess Otahime back to the Dragon Palace, and deployed more troops to the front of the Dragon Palace. The guards raised their spears at the demonstration team. To make trouble, it means to be caught. Seeing that the Dragon Palace is really serious, these fishman and the mermaid swallowed their saliva and looked nervous, looking at the people around them from front to back, a little overwhelmed, but with the first person to go first, pick up during the time they came down, the remaining fishman and the mermaid left here one by one, groaning. Huodi, who stayed in place, sneered, and a sinister look flashed in his narrowed eyes. Ja ha ha ha, the effect has been achieved. Everything is ready, only the east wind is due. The incident that humans failed to assassinate Princess Otoji quickly spread throughout Fishman Island and became a hot topic. The invisible storm was even bigger than the previous incidents. The princess loved by the residents, the severity of the tense is self-evident. And after the continuous development of this incident, there is a lot of wind and wind filling the alleys of Fishman Island. Not only the atmosphere is depressed, but even people's hearts are flustered. On a new day, a large number of troops gathered outside the Dragon Palace city, not only the Dragon Palace guards, but also the marine who followed Zhang Yang. My name is Das, and I will be in charge of the outer security of the Dragon Palace with you for this engagement ceremony, Das. A hammerhead shark fishman in guard clothes, with long curly hair and a warhammer on his back, came to bow in front of me. His sharp teeth were slightly cracked and he said, "Major Bernie, this is the first cooperation, please advise." Das. Captain Das, please advise. Bernie was stunned for a moment, and when he came back to his senses, he politely extended his right hand, but the fishman named Das glanced at Bernie's palm, a look of disgust flashed in his eyes, and said with a sneer, he walked away, "Colonel Bernie, Fishman Island is a mess. I can't be sure what will happen today. Protect yourself." Das. Chapter 109. The ceremony begins. Fishman Island, today ushered in a historic scene. Princess Mermaid and Colonel Marine are about to complete the engagement ceremony. The news has spread all over the streets of Fishman Island and has become a hot topic of discussion between Fishman and Mermaid. Today, the Dragon Palace does not know if the engagement ceremony will be successfully completed. There are more and more opposition forces these days, and I feel that something must happen. And lately the thugs on Fishman Street and Arlong have been hanging out a lot and don't know what they're planning. What else can that group of people do together? It's a bad bargain. Charlie, who was wearing a purple-blue hoodie, sat on a bubble. Similar voices kept coming from her ears. Her eyes were a little complicated. After sighing, she muttered to herself, "You dare to steal the murderous medicine, brother, it's time for Zhang Zhang to teach you a lesson this time. I'll take pains once, I hope you can turn around in time." At this time, Ryugu Castle was heavily defended, with Marine and Ryugu guards jointly guarding the outside, while the interior of Ryugu was personally in charge of the guard Captain Jinbei, including the 3 Neptune brothers who also joined the patrol team. The hall of the Dragon Palace was rearranged at this time. It was full of joy. Many tables and chairs were arranged. At this time, a large group of people were busy here. An elderly catfish man wearing a top hat, a single-sided glasses in his left eye, and a cane with horns in his right hand. Standing on a high platform, he raised the cane and pointed downwards from time to time. Pointing, "I can't stand it anymore, can you handle it gently? And you, why are you so panicked? How stupid. A blue-skinned whale shark, fish man, came to the hall while patrolling with a dozen guards. Looking at the old mermaid man blowing his beard on the stage, he bowed to him and said respectfully, Your Excellency Minister Zuo. Jinbei. After the old man scolded the fish man who knocked down the chair with thick hands and feet, he raised his cane and pointed at Jinbei, glared, and said sternly, Today, if something happens, I'll ask you. Time passed slowly, and there were also food and drinks on the tables in the hall. In a dark corner, there was no one but two guards. Huo Di, who was wearing a wolfskin scarf on his neck, was facing the side. One of the fishman guards whispered, Are you all ready? The fishman guard nodded and said in a low voice, Vanderdaken X has already infiltrated the Dragon Palace. With his ability to target fruit, he can definitely kill the mermaid princess. As for the drink in charge of that marine, he has already poisoned it. Everything is going on smoothly and orderly. The breath of conspiracy continues to spread in this joyful Dragon Palace, and it will only explode at a certain moment. Boom. A magnificent bell suddenly rang throughout the entire Fishman Island, and it lingered for a long time. Hearing this sound, among the islanders who were discussing in the streets, when they heard this bell, no matter what they were doing, they stopped. After the movement in his hand, he stopped talking, and his expressions were different. Engagement. It's time. This bell was the sound of the engagement ceremony of the mermaid princess and Major Marine. At this moment, in a huge sunken ship, Arlong was sitting on the bow, surrounded by the officers of the Fishman pirates, and gathered on the deck. Lots of fishmen with weapons. As the sound of the bell spread to the bottom of the sea and landed in everyone's minds, the assembled Fishman's emotions were all high, and Arlong stood up and sneered, Ding ha ha, it seems that the time is up. But Arlong did not. It was found that behind him was an octopus fishman with a trumpet-like mouth, 6 arms, and multiple strands of silver-gray hair. He looked like a 5-pointed star on his head. He was Hachi, the leader of the Fishman pirates. Hachi's expression was out of tune with other Fishman's. When he looked at Arlong's back, he seemed to want to stop talking, and there was a hint of guilt in his expression. Dragon Palace, the hall. As the bell rang, everyone in the hall of the Dragon Palace stopped their movements. The left minister standing on the high platform knocked on the ground with his stick and shouted, The time is up, please, the king, the princess. At the entrance of the hall, there was a red carpet in the middle. King Neptune and Princess Otoji walked into the hall hand in hand, and then sat on their thrones. Major Zhang Yang please. Minister Zuo's voice fell, and a young man wearing a marine coat and a justice cloak appeared from another entrance, walking along the red carpet, slowly walking towards the high platform, looking at the surrounding scene, with a strange expression. This person is not publicity, who else could it be? Zhang Yang has not gone out these days, and has been living in the Dragon Palace, or in a few days, he has established a friendship with Shirahoshi, a mermaid princess who is only 4 years old. What surprised Zhang Yang was that Shirahoshi was not so afraid of him, but was very interested in him, which surprised both Princess Otoji and King Neptune. At first, they were worried that Shirahoshi would not come and get engaged to Zhang Yang. Although Zhang Yang had never gone out, he had a clear understanding of what was happening outside by relying on his perception of spiritual pressure. At this moment, walking on the high platform, Zhang Yang stood on the left side of the left minister, looking down at the people below, as if to have a panoramic view of their expressions, especially when looking at the figures below. There was a gleam in his eyes. Flashed by. Princess Shirahoshi please. With the sound of the left minister falling, wearing a fish-shaped hair accessory, with wavy and flowing pink hair, a somewhat huge female mermaid with a shade of pink fishtail, a little timidly walked out from the other gate, walking on the red carpet. In her arms, she was holding a small shark like a pet, but it was cute. Grandpa right, there are a lot of people here. Shirahoshi looked at the large number of people gathered in the hall, and timidly looked at the seahorse mermaid with a beard carrying a saber and a long sword with a crescent blade in his right hand. Having an old minister by the princess's side will keep you safe. The minister of right looked at Shirahoshi dotingly, and then said in a gentle tone. Shirahoshi nodded lightly and looked towards the front. When he saw Marine on the left side of Minister Zuo, Shirahoshi said happily from a distance, "Brother Zhang. Chapter 110 Drunk Murder. Please exchange tokens between the two parties." The left minister stood between Shirahoshi and Zhang Yang. When the voice fell, Zhang Yang pulled the cloak of justice and handed it to the left minister. Shirahoshi, who was standing there, was at a loss, and the right minister took out a piece of paper and handed it to Shirahoshi. Shirahoshi was still timid. Then he looked at Minister Zuo and said pitifully, "Grandpa Zuo, here. This paper is the contract between our Fish Man Island and Marine. Today, taking advantage of Princess Shirahoshi's engagement ceremony, Major Marine will sign this contract in person." Minister Zuo picked up the contract with the densely packed text, and after letting everyone take a look, ordered people to bring tables and chairs, and bring pen and ink. This was a historic scene. No one spoke in the audience, and it was completely silent. There were only the sound of pen writing in public and the sound of swallowing saliva from the audience. Click. When the last sound came from the pen in his hand, Zhang Yang stood up and handed the alliance contract with his name on it to the Minister Zuo. Formally forge an alliance contract. As soon as they opened their mouths, although the fish man and the mermaid in the audience had different expressions, there was an endless stream of applause at this moment. With the end of the most important ceremony, the atmosphere in the Dragon Palace Hall also relaxed a lot, but the expressions of a few people became more and more solemn. Because Shirahoshi is weak, he is not used to this kind of situation, and walked to his room under the escort of the right minister. However, no one noticed that a four-legged tiger shark fish man in a formal dress, a top hat, with upturned hair and a beard, with multiple necklaces hanging on his body, passed by Shirahoshi. His right hand wearing white gloves touched Shirahoshi's fishtail without leaving a trace. A sinister smile appeared on the corner of the fish man's mouth. He took out white gloves from his pocket and slowly put them on his right hand. "Major Zhang Yang, come and let me toast you." "And me, come, Major Zhang Yang." "Major Zhang Yang, are you all right?" It's okay, I'm going to sit at Princess Shirahoshi's place." Seeing Zhang Yang swaying out of the hall of the Dragon Palace and leading several guards to patrol Huodi, a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. He said something to the guards behind him, and then he saw the guards disperse around. When Huodi walked out of the hall of the Dragon Palace and came to a corner, looking around to see that there was no one else, he took out the phone bug and said softly, "Over there. 10 minutes later, start." In other words, when Zhang Yang came to Shirahoshi's room, his consciousness was already a little fuzzy, and he felt that the surrounding environment was constantly shaking, and he fell heavily on the sofa beside him. Shirahoshi was a little scared when he saw this scene, and then said timidly, "Zhang Yang brother, are you alright?" "No, it's okay." Zhang Yang buried his head on the sofa, and did not move, only Vivi moved his lips, not even opening, and a faint voice came out immediately, "Sleep. 1. Will." After that, no matter what Shirahoshi said, Zhang Yang didn't react at all, and there was an endless stream of snoring. Time passed, and no one noticed that in a certain corner of Shirahoshi's room, the air was a little distorted, as if someone was hiding there. About 10 minutes later, the mermaid princess was already asleep, and a sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded. A long knife flew out of the window and shot at Shirahoshi with a sharp breath. Without even making any sound, the knife had already been inserted into Shirahoshi's fish tail, or in other words, it was inserted precisely before the part that the four-legged fish man's palm touched. Shirahoshi's fish tail was inserted with the long knife, and blood gradually spread out. The sound of Tadata continued to sound, and the blood stained the ground. Not only that, but the wound gradually turned purple and black, and even as time passed, The blood that flows out also transforms towards the black. And it was at this moment that the knife was pulled out of thin air, and then flew to Zhang Yang, as if there was an invisible force that made Zhang Yang in his sleep grasp the handle of the knife, and even Zhang Yang was turned over. Leaning on the sofa, holding a long knife that kept dripping blood to the ground in his hand. It's none of my business now. In this strange and silent atmosphere, a voice that could not be heard suddenly sounded, and the air was twisted and moved, and the window smashed by the long knife was opened directly, followed by a sound of breaking the air, as if someone jumped off. Your Excellency Minister Wright, Major Burney asked me to find Major Zhang Yang. A fishman guard said respectfully when he saw the minister on the right guarding the door. Major Zhang Yang seems to have drunk too much just now. He should be asleep now. I'll go take a look. Minister Wright walked to the door step by step, knocked on the door, found that there was no movement inside, and chuckled lightly. The princess is probably asleep too. Then, Minister Wright carefully pushed open the door. Outside the hall of the Dragon Palace, Huodi was leaning on the wall at the corner, and there was no one around. I don't know at that moment, Huodi's originally closed eyes slowly opened, and he muttered, "Joe, is it done?" There was obviously no one around, but at this moment there was a whisper, the void next to Huodi distorted, and a figure appeared beside him. This is a shark fish man. There are many black and white stripes covering the whole body. There is also a O2 pattern tattoo on the center of the chest. Said, at this time, the person we arranged should have brought the old man to discover the body of the mermaid princess, and the murderer. Huodi cracked his mouth, revealing his terrifying teeth. He clenched the half-red and half-black capsule in his hand and walked towards the Dragon Palace Hall. He said, "Go and tell Brother Arlong, you're ready to do it." Jiao nodded, his figure distorted for a while, blending into the surrounding environment and disappearing. Chapter 111 Questions about the royal family. Major Zhang Yang, please give me an explanation. Neptune's questioning filled Shirahoshi's room. After learning that Shirahoshi was killed by Zhang Yang's drunkenness, Neptune and Otahime rushed here. Country. Neptune's voice woke Zhang Yang up. Zhang Yang was about to say hello, but his eyes fell on the scary wound that had turned purple in the mermaid princess. At the same time, he felt sticky in his right hand, looked down. When he saw the long knife in his hand that was covered with blood after solidification, he was completely stunned. I don't know, I just woke up. Zhang Yang looked at the mermaid princess with dull eyes, and then looked at the long knife in his hand, and it was a bit difficult to explain for a while. Major Zhang Yang, I know you are strong, but if you resist now, you will know the consequences. Neptune's face was gloomy, and he said to the guard next to him, "Cuff him with seastone chains and put him in the sky prison." Yes. Jinbei, block the news here, and must not let this matter spread to Fishman Island. Seeing Zhang Yang put on seastone handcuffs and being led by several guards into the sky prison, Neptune said to Jinbei with a solemn expression, "I'll do it right now." Jinbei replied, and suddenly his expression changed, and at this moment, a guard rushed in a panic, out of breath, with a terrified face. No, it's a demonstration. The team rushed into the Dragon Palace. What? Everyone present was shocked, and Neptune suddenly lost his voice. Isn't there Marine and the guards guarding the door? I don't know about this either. Anyway, I don't know where they learned that Princess Shirahoshi was killed by Marine. At this moment, before the guard could finish speaking, he was directly interrupted by Neptune with an ugly face. What? Did they know about this? Damn, who put the news out? Neptune scolded, and without any hesitation, he went downstairs and walked towards the Dragon Palace Hall. As for how these people were put in, the time goes back a few minutes. Outside the Dragon Palace, Marine and the Neptune Royal Army were patrolling the surroundings together, but at this moment, a group of people came directly to the Dragon Palace, and when he saw Major Burney and the other Marines, he was all jealous. It's you who killed the mermaid princess. It's okay to be engaged, but it's so despicable to kill Princess Shirahoshi. Marine, Get out of Mermaid Island. Bernie was dumbfounded when he heard these words, but even so, he still knew his responsibilities. When he saw these people looking like they were going to enter the Dragon Palace, he immediately ordered Marine, raised his spear, and shouted, "Today is the engagement ceremony of Major Zhang Yang and the Mermaid Princess. You can't make trouble. If you dare to make trouble, don't blame the gun without eyes." Seeing the dark muzzle, everyone couldn't help swallowing. After all, no matter how much trouble they made, they were still afraid of death. "Colonel Bernie, as I said, everything is going to happen today, so be careful, Das." Quietly, Das came behind Bernie, and when the sound came out, he lifted the warhammer and smashed it towards Bernie. "Captain Das." Bernie was startled, his heart was shocked, but he didn't care much, his lips moved slightly, "Shave. There's still a little bit of skill, Das." Das slammed the hammer down, but only hit the air, his face turned cold, and he looked at Bernie who had appeared on the other side. "What do you mean?" Bernie frowned and questioned. According to the latest news from the Dragon Palace, Major Zhang Yang murdered the Mermaid Princess after being drunk. Das didn't go to Liboni again, but spoke slowly to the guards of the Dragon Palace. "Your Majesty, Princess, kind heart, agreed to this alliance, but Marine is so far ahead, can we still agree to these alliances?" These fishman guards didn't like humans in their hearts. Now that they heard that Marine killed their Mermaid Princess, their anger rose directly, but their reason still prevented them from taking action against Marine. "Come on in, Das." Das said to the crowd gathered at the gate of the Dragon Palace. Seeing Bernie and the other Marines trying to hinder, Das sneered, "Papara hammer." The warhammer in his hand suddenly threw out, spinning in a large circle, knocking down one Marine after another, and then Das flashed and came directly in front of Bernie, his muscles bulging, and he punched out. Das moved so fast that Bernie was caught off guard, and anxiously blocked the scabbard in front of him. Under Das' powerful force, Bernie quickly retreated to the back. The arm was still numb. How can the strength be so great? Even Fishman can't have such strength. Shaking his numb arm, Bernie's pupils shrank suddenly when his eyes swept across the surface of the scabbard. At this moment, he realized that the scabbard in his hand was about to break, knowing that it was made of steel. This is the power of the evil medicine. As a large number of people who gathered to make trouble rushed into the Dragon Palace Hall, the place fell into a panic, and when I saw Nipton, it was like finding a vent, and the torrents kept coming. Did the Mermaid Princess get killed by that Marine? What do you mean by the royal family? Is this the alliance you speak of? Is this the future where we can coexist peacefully and enjoy the real sun together? If you continue to stick to your alliance, we Fishman Island will not obey the royal family's orders. The constant questioning made Neptune's face more and more ugly. At this moment, Jinbei shouted, "Give you 3 minutes, if you haven't left the Dragon Palace, then don't blame the old man for being ruthless." The King Neptune Army. Under the order of Jinbei, all the guards in the Dragon Palace appeared and surrounded the group of Fishman. In the next moment, the gloomy voice suddenly echoed in the hall of the Dragon Palace, making everyone stunned. "It's so majestic. When did the duty of the Neptune Royal Army shift from protecting the safety of Fishman Island to threatening the people of Man Island?" Chapter 112 Is it stupid? First of all, regardless of the opinions of the subjects, he insisted on forming an alliance with Marine, and even in order to consolidate the opportunity, he even planned to intermarry. The most hateful thing is that Major Marine even killed the Mermaid Princess. Are you planning to make Fishman Island a human colony? Is this the real royal family? Looks like it's time for you to hand over your power and bring peace to Fishman. With the continuous sound of this cold voice, the hall of the Dragon Palace fell into silence, and when Jinbei heard this somewhat familiar voice, he frowned and scolded, "Damn Arlong, what nonsense. Boss Jinbei, isn't what I said true?" A fishman with a serrated nose first appeared in front of everyone. It was Arlong, and with Arlong's appearance, the rest of the fishman pirates followed closely, and there were even several others. Guards dressed in Royal Neptune garb. Hoodie, Wes. Jinbei looked at the two guards, as if suddenly realized, so that he could explain what happened before. Thinking of this, Jinbei's face became more and more ugly. Why are you doing this? Boss Jinbei, Brother Arlong, didn't you say everything? We are for the freedom and peace of Fishman Island. Huodi walked up to Arlong, cracked his mouth when he looked at Jinbei, exposed his sharp teeth, and said loudly, the residents of Fishman Island, since Marine came to Fishman Island, it has happened in the past few days. What you should see clearly in your eyes, and now you are holding guns at your own people. Is it necessary for the royal family to hand over power? Everyone gathered looked at each other. The Arlong group they knew were all bully pirates on Fishman Street, but at this moment, with the complexity in the eyes of everyone, they became firmer, and as a fishman shouted after handing over the power, the voices came out one after another, and when they echoed in the hall of the Dragon Palace, they were magnificent. Yes, hand over power. Even at this moment, individual ministers in the palace joined the opposition forces and shouted loudly. King Neptune, because of your royal family's dictatorship, this has led to the formation of the current situation. If you are a little remorseful, then take the initiative to hand over your power. Arlong looked at Neptune and said proudly. Seeing that Arlong didn't take himself as a king at all, Neptune said in a low voice, Arlong, you need to think about the consequences of what you do. Your Majesty, you have no chance of winning. If you use force to force you to hand over your power, the face of the royal family will not look good. Ding ha ha ha, boys, you said, right. Arlong laughed arrogantly, and the next moment, behind him, outside the hall of the Dragon Palace, there seemed to be hundreds of Fishman's voices coming together, shouting, hand over the power. Hand over power. Under the infection of this powerful force, the crowd of Fishman Island gathered together, their voices became louder, and their expressions were crazy. That should be it. The sound of seizing power in the Dragon Palace became the whole thing, but the next moment, a voice with a brisk tone, which was obviously not loud, was strangely suppressing the roar of the villain, and clearly fell on every fishman, in the mind of the mermaid. Impossible, how is she still alive? The voice stopped abruptly, and when Arlong and Huodi saw the two figures slowly walking out of the other exit, their expressions changed and they were shocked. Why is it impossible? This is a plan to lure snakes out of their holes. The two figures were naturally Zhang Yang and Shirahoshi. Zhang Yang looked at Arlong and the others, who were dumbfounded. Isho said, now that I know, are you surprised? Impossible, I saw Shirahoshi poisoned to death with my own eyes. Jia-O, who had black and white stripes, stepped forward and looked at Shirahoshi, who had no wounds at the tail of the fish, with an incredible look on his face. Isn't it stupid? Are you hiding in the room and I can't feel it? It's all for you to see. Zhang Yang looked at Jia-O as if he were an idiot, and continued, if you don't believe it, let the target person try again and see if he can release the fruit power for Princess Shirahoshi. Vanderdecken X. Arlong let out a gloomy cry, and the four-legged Vanderdecken came to Arlong, swallowed, and in a panic, removed the white glove on his right hand. As soon as he pointed to the long knife on the waist of the guard, when the long knife floated into the air, Vanderdecken X closed his eyes slightly, and the long knife hesitated in midair. The next moment, cold sweat kept coming out of his forehead, and he opened his mouth in panic. How could it not find the target? Trash. Arlong's face suddenly gloomy. Looking at Nipton, he said viciously, since the matter has been exposed, then we don't need to hold back and pretend to be good people. In a word, today, you must hand over the power. As soon as the words fell, countless fishmen rushed into the hall of the Dragon Palace with weapons. It's rare that you have worked so hard. These idiots have no effect at all. Trash fish will always be trash fish. Take the evil drug S, or you won't have a chance to win. Conqueror Reiatsu. As soon as Zhang Yang's words fell, a powerful spiritual pressure came out directly, and an extremely suppressed and powerful momentum was controlled by Zhang Yang, sweeping towards Arlong and others like a tide. Pumbaa. In just a split second, Fishman below the cadre rolled his eyes and fainted one after another on the ground. Watching this scene, Arlong and the others swallowed their saliva. Everyone took out a handful of black and red capsules and stuffed them into it. Mouth. Ah 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 ah. As the screams continued to come from the mouths of Arlong and the others, and their expressions were ferocious, each of their pupils turned bloodthirsty scarlet. Muscles burst out in an instant, and at this moment, a tyrannical aura came out of these fishman's bodies. After taking the medicine, Huodi clenched his fists, and even the air seemed to be crushed. Feeling this powerful force, his scarlet eyes looked at Zhang Yangzhan, and a killing intent vibrated. Even Vice Admiral is not afraid at all. Chapter 113 Battle of the Dragon Palace. The strength is indeed improved by several grades, and it is a match for some Vice Admiral, but Zhang Yang couldn't help but be surprised after using the sensory spiritual pressure to observe Fishman who had taken the poisonous medicine, but the next moment, the corner of his mouth was rising. It's still not enough. After all, I am the man who killed prospective Admiral Akainu. Zhang Yang added another sentence in his heart. Boy, don't be too arrogant. Arlong snorted coldly, because his teeth can be regenerated, so he directly took them out and held them in his right hand. At the same time, the teeth in his mouth grew rapidly and returned to their original state. Arlong took them off again and held them in his right hand. In the left hand. The Legend of Sharks 1 darts. Holding the shocking shark teeth in his hand, Arlong's body was like a torpedo, sprinting towards Zhang Yang. Ding! Ding! Arlong's speed was very fast, and he was already in front of Zhang Yang almost at the next moment. The two sharp teeth in his hand were biting towards Zhang Yang like two evil sharks. The blade of Dongfang Shoji's Tachi was directly bitten by two sharp teeth. My teeth can crush anything, and so can your knife. Arlong's two hands opened at the next moment, and the force instantly increased when biting, and the heavy collision sound continued to echo. Trembling. This is the oldest and strongest Zanpakudo of the flame element, and the blade is like fire. How can it be so easy? When Zhang Yang heard Arlong's words, Isho couldn't help but murmured in his heart, and there were two popping sounds in his ears. Impossible. The next moment, under Arlong's incredible expression, the two teeth that were biting on Lu Ruahuo collapsed directly, and countless sharp teeth were scattered on the ground. How can there be so many impossible? A wave of spiritual power shook, and the tip of the sword with a flaming blade gathered white light, and there was a faint flash of thunder arcs on it, and at this moment, Zhang Yang's voice suddenly came out, the 63 thunderbolts that broke the way. Shout out. Roar. As the tip of the sword pointed at Arlong, a roar sounded instantly, and a thick beam of lightning flashed from the tip of the sword, which was like a fire, and shot towards Arlong. The speed was so fast that Arlong had no chance to escape. Hitomi shrank, arms crossed in front of his chest. When the thunder roar hit Arlong, it left a shocking crack on the ground. Arlong's figure quickly backed up and directly hit the wall of the Dragon Palace Hall, causing smoke to rise for a while. Brother Arlong. The other fishmons exclaimed and prepared to see his condition, but the next moment, Arlong walked out of the smoke. His face was gloomy, and he patted the dust on his body. At this time, his arms had turned charred black, but that's all, no injuries appeared. Come on together. Arlong said this, and pulled out a large saw blade that shone with a cold light from behind. The figure jumped up and charged towards Zhang Yang again. Even the thunder roar cannon that broke Dao 63 didn't have much effect on him. How much has the physical strength been improved by the fierce medicine? Zhang Yang's eyes jumped indistinctly, and there was a slightly surprised murmur in his heart, and the next moment he said loudly, Jinbei, bring the king, queen, princess, and other guards, and all the subjects leave the Dragon Palace as soon as possible. Major Zhang Yang, hold on for a while. After the old man escorts everyone out, he will come to help you. Jinbei nodded solemnly, without the slightest hesitation to organize guards, and all of a sudden, a stream of people fled from all directions towards the outside of the Dragon Palace. Good. Vivi Isho swung his right hand with a flaming blade, and Yang Yang's voice was slightly low, but the voice full of coercion suddenly sounded. There are all kinds of things, all turn to ashes. The blade is like fire. Just when Lu Ren Ruahuo and Arlong's big saw blade were about to collide, Zhang Yang's last voice suddenly sounded, and a hot and tyrannical flame wrapped directly around Lu Ren Ruahuo's blade. Pung! With the sound of a heavy collision, a terrifying scorching flame suddenly rose violently, and the flowing blade Ruohuo with a full foot-long flame smashed directly onto the big saw blade. The huge impact force caused Arlong to spit out blood, and his figure shot backwards like a kite with a broken string. At the same time, Zhang Yang's sword left a shocking crack on the ground, rising up with raging flames. Gollum! The other fishman rushing towards Zhang Yang saw and Arlong turned into a black shadow and shot past them, and when they heard the sound of the wall being smashed through, they were all shocked and swallowed. Go! Although they looked at Zhang Yang, their eyes were full of fear, but they did not hesitate, and rushed towards Zhang Yang. Huo Di's figure was at the forefront, and his momentum was also the strongest. When he was about to approach him, he let out a roar. Shuixin Group Sharks. Huo Di's hands were facing the water pool in the center of the Dragon Palace. When he rushed forward, he grabbed abruptly in the air, and the seawater seemed to be surging by an inexplicable force. Going raging towards Zhang Yang. And the most shocking thing is that when the seawater was in the air, it turned into a group of sharks, with scarlet light shining in their eyes, their shark teeth opened, and they all rushed towards Zhang Yang. Why are you sending sharks? When the corners of his mouth were raised, Ruohuo, the flowing blade with a hot flame rising in his hand, suddenly slashed forward. With this slash, the flames suddenly appeared, and the flames were like a light curtain. The figure shrouded directly. Bang bang bang. One after another, huge black objects fell from the flaming light curtain. Zhang Yang shrugged his shoulders, and grinned. I'm sorry, it's burnt. Fishman's face was livid. At this time, several fast figures had come to Zhang Yang. Among them was Das. Das raised the warhammer, and with the momentum of thunder, he slammed towards Zhang Yang condescendingly. And at the same time, a fishman fish with a blue circle, with a jug tied to his waist, holding a pair of knives, the whole person is like a drunken swordsman. Slaying Chidori Foot Impact. Chapter 114 Hachi's Block. Damn! Arlong, who smashed through the wall of the Dragon Palace and fell into the wreckage of the stone, spit out blood with pieces of internal organs, looking at the half-cut saw blade in his hand, and the shocking sword mark on his chest, his anger rose directly from his chest. He got up, and at this moment, he threw all the remaining murderous medicine into his mouth. Under the hideous face, the long black hair, at this moment, turned into white quickly visible to the naked eye. Slaying Chidori Foot Impact. On the other side, when the leopard Zhang, who was like a drunken swordsman, came to Zhang Yang, when Das smashed it with a hammer, the 8 long swords that leopard Zhang held in his hands and feet were like a storm at this moment. The terrifying force slammed into the sword that was flaming. As expected of the number 1 swordsman on Fishman Island. Under the continuous and powerful force, Zhang Yang stepped back and looked at Leopard Zhang with a touch of admiration in his heart. At a certain moment, Leopard Zhang and Das jumped up, a hammer and 8 swords with a powerful sonic boom. The sound burst into the air and smashed heavily on the flowing blade Ruahuo's sword, which was rising with flames. Pung! A heavy collision sounded all over the Dragon Palace, and Zhang Yang's arms were numb. Under this huge pressure, with Ningfang as the center, the ground within a few dozen meters around it collapsed and shattered rapidly. Spreading downwards. Bite the meat and eat it. Dharma Fireball Cut. At this moment, a small cigar sharkfish man wearing a helmet of an ancient warrior from the east actually drilled out of the ground not far in front of him while Zhang Yang was snoring. They were all burning with raging flames. Shenyan expected 66 songs. Suddenly, the void behind Zhang Yang distorted, and Jia O, who had black and white stripes, was holding a chain, and at this moment, it was wrapped around his neck. Heiteko. Huo Di's figure appeared on top of Zhang Yang's head, and a condescending punch slammed out. This punch directly compressed the moisture in the surrounding environment, and with a powerful impact, smashed towards Zhang Yang. After Leopard Zhang and Das, almost all of these ultimate moves attacked Zhang Yang in an instant, almost monopolizing all directions. The tide is sweeping towards Zhang Yang. Unfortunately, you met me. Zhang Yang closed his eyes slightly, and when the words came out, a touch of unprecedented confidence appeared on his face, which made the surrounding fishman stunned. His brows wrinkled, Huo Tian's expression turned cold, and he spit out, "It's a mystery." The next moment, a powerful impact came to suppress Zhang Yang's head. Suddenly opening his eyes, Zhang Yang's spiritual pressure seemed to have found a drain, and the spiritual pressure quickly spewed out like a wind and a cloud, and the rumbling sound became everything, covering up all sounds. At this moment, with Zhang Yang shaking his hand, the flame was silent for a moment, and then suddenly became manic, as if entangled in the flowing blade Ruo Huo. The flame on the sword received an order. Die. At this moment, the fishman all felt that this long sword wrapped in flames was a bit weird, but the arrow had to be fired on the string, and with the sound of their roar, the ultimate move was thrown. Torch. In the murmur, a flame centered on Zhang Yang quickly erupted, spreading out like ripples toward the surroundings. The fishman was shocked, and the flame became everything in their pupils. In an instant, the figures around Zhang Yang were hit by the flames with a scream, and if they were hit hard, they would spit out a mouthful of blood mixed with visceral remains. Boom. The next moment the flames burst, and a powerful impact swept in. These fishmen bounced away from Zhang Yang, and the other fishman who hadn't shot yet exploded like a kite with a broken string. Go. Because of inertia, when everyone was hit by the strong impact force on the ground, they still did not stop, and they kept rolling along the road until they hit the wall of the Dragon Palace, receiving a major impact. The wall shattered, and everyone's body sank in. After a few blinks, it fell to the ground. And because of the torch, the surroundings became a sea of fire, and the temperature of the Dragon Palace instantly became hot. Damn, how can it be so strong? Looking at the figure with a long sword in the middle of the sea of fire, Huo Di struggled to get up. At this moment, his whole body was extensively burned, and the wounds were shocking. And the other people are not much better than Huo Di, and the injuries are all half a catty. See for yourself, do you want to swallow the rest of the medicine? When Arlong's voice came into everyone's ears, everyone's eyes couldn't help but look at the figure who walked in from the defect of the Dragon Palace. Seeing this, they were all shocked and said in a voiceless voice, "Arlong brother, did you take too much medicine?" Zhang Yang looked at the white-haired Arlong, who had grown a bit bigger. The teeth in his mouth had now become jagged, and Arlong, who was emitting a fearful force from his body, frowned slightly. Kaka. Arlong pulled out his teeth twice, then put it on his fist, sneered, and when the figure rushed towards Zhang Yang, the sound of sonic booms followed one after another, like the roar of the sky, and he came to Zhang Yang in the blink of an eye. It's so fast, and it looks like Brother Arlong's teeth are sharper and tougher than before. Brother Arlong took an overdose of the ferocious drug S and looked at his gray hair. I'm afraid his lifespan will pass quickly. It has come to this point. Let's fight back. Eat. Fishmons all took out a large number of black and red capsules from their hands, and were about to throw them into their mouths, when they drank together and suddenly sounded, "Don't eat." Everyone was stunned and looked at Hachi, the octopus on the side. Their brows were all wrinkled. Huo Di looked at Hachi for a while and suddenly said, "Hachi, you didn't take any medicine." Hachi had a simple and honest face, with guilt in his eyes, and said slowly, "Everyone, if you take too much of the medicine, your life will be in danger. I have no chance to stop Brother Arlong, and I can't stop everyone from swallowing it for the first time, but this time you must not." Chapter 115 Feeling Powerless. Hachi, you are afraid of death, but we are not. Huo Di's face was gloomy, and regardless of Hachi's obstruction, he threw the black and red capsules into his mouth at once. In an instant, Huo Di's face was grim, as if it was extremely painful. His black hair turned white and his body grew bigger. In the meantime, the fin knife on the back also became a little longer. With red eyes, he pulled out the fin knife on his back and blasted forward. Akio. Hachi looked at Fishman, whose mouth was like a morning glory, with a pleading look, but this Akio shook his head with a sigh, and swallowed a large amount of the murderous medicine in his hand, as did the others. A strong breath was revealed, and he galloped away. Why, humans can coexist with Fishman Island, why fight? Hachi's tears accumulated in his eyes and fell drop by drop. At this moment, a palm patted him on the shoulder. When Hachi looked up, he saw Leopard Zhang, who was drinking with a jug next to him, and couldn't help but be stunned. Hachi, do you know why you and I fought each other and you didn't win? Leopard Zhang licked the wine overflowing around his mouth with his tongue. Seeing Hachi shaking his head with a dull face, Leopard Zhang took out the poison and swallowed it all. When his eyes showed a fierce glow, his voice slowly came out, Shintai soft. Hachi looked at the murderous medicine in his hand, and then at Fishman, who was fighting, with a complicated expression. First style slash. Bang bang bang. The sound of the collision continued to sound. During such high-intensity battles, although there was blood spilling from the corners of Zhang Yang's mouth, the surface of his body was rarely injured. On the other hand, Arlong's group, at this time, in addition to the shocking sword marks, there was also a scar on his skin. The traces of the large area being burned by the flames, it is already obvious who is stronger or weaker at this moment. Not only that, but 2 Fishman died under Zhang Yang's sword. Damn, how can it be so strong? After taking the second medicine, even in the case of life overdraft, he did not gain the slightest advantage, which made Arlong and others unable to hang on their faces, and a fierce offensive broke out towards Zhang Yang. The 81 boundaries of the Tao. Zhang Yang stood on the spot, the spiritual power in his body gathered on the left palm, and when he pressed forward, a huge defensive wall rose directly from the ground, separating himself from them. Just have fun with you guys, let me exercise my ghost way. When Zhang Yang's voice came out, the defensive wall was already crumbling, and Zhang Yang didn't plan to rely on it to stop the Fishman group who took the poison for the second time. The 67 Thunders of Destruction. Just as the defensive wall broke open and Arlong's group rushed out, Zhang Yang's voice sounded immediately. At the same time, the left hand full of spiritual power waved forward. When the spiritual power spread out, it suddenly turned into a mist. Enveloped the Arlong gang. Crackling. A series of weak thunder and lightning continued to rumble, and there were lightning flashes in the mist. Arlong and his group who were in this mist were paralyzed for a moment, and their strength was directly weakened at this moment. What kind of fog is this? When the sound of horror sounded in the fog, Zhang Yang moved again, and Lu Ren Ruahuo slammed forward, the 54 rat scorpions of breaking the road. When a disc-shaped flame was thrown out, it swirled with flames and came directly to suppress the Arlong group. Huo Di's voice was annoyed. Damn, what kind of fruit power is this? Yellow fire flash. Before Huo Di could speak, a bright light suddenly burst out when Zhang Yang's fingertips condensed. Mixed with the disc flame, under the rendering of thunder, the sound of the explosion suddenly rang out. Several figures flew upside down in the black smoke, blood continued to overflow from the wound, and then smashed to the ground. Since you are a devil fruit person, you must be afraid of water. The corners of Arlong and Huo Di, who flew upside down, also had blood overflowing from the corners of their mouths, but the next moment they looked at each other in the air. It seemed that a huge impact force suddenly burst out from the soles of their feet. Under the reaction, they turned into a black shadow and moved towards Zhang Yang. He shot away, and when he was about to reach Zhang Yang, he stretched out his palm. Smashing waterfall sharks. When the words fell, Arlong and Huo Di's palms were both condensed by a water ball, and the next moment they smashed directly at Zhang Yang. Although Zhang Yang didn't know what the hell they were going to do, he swung the blade like fire at will, and the water ball went straight from the middle. When it broke in two and hit the ground, the mutation happened in an instant. Boom boom boom. At the moment when the 4.5 water balloons touched the ground, they exploded directly. In an instant, 4 torrents rushed towards Zhang Yang. When the torrent formed a deep pool on the sunken ground here, Zhang Yang's figure was already submerged into the sea. At the moment when the water pool was formed, a series of low roars sounded one after another. At this moment, there were actually a large number of sharks, with scarlet eyes and sharp teeth pounced towards Zhang Yang. When he got to the water, there was nothing he could do. There was no slag left that would definitely be bitten by the shark. Ding ha ha ha. Ja ha ha ha. Arlong and Huodi spat out blood with visceral mints from their mouths, and laughed while standing by the pool, but the smiles stopped in the next moment. Hey, who told you that I'm afraid of water? With the same smiling voice, the next moment, Arlong and Huodi saw fist-sized bubbles appear on the surface of the water pool and burst open, and hot steam also rose on the water pool. Pung! At this moment, a huge pillar of fire erupted directly in Tan, causing both Arlong to take a few steps back in fear. After the pillar of fire disappeared, a figure was suspended in midair, and there was no seawater under it, and no trace of sharks. How is it possible? Seeing Zhang Yang condescendingly looking down at the two of them, they all felt a deep sense of powerlessness in their hearts, and when they looked at Zhang Yang, there was already a touch of fear rising in their hearts. In the outside world, on the square, on a huge screen, this scene is playing at this time. Chapter 116 Lao Su, Let You Underestimate Me. On Gilcred Square, the eyes of the crowded crowd were all staring at the scene played on the huge screen, while Neptune, Otoji, Shirahoshi, including the 3 princes, were all at the forefront at the moment, with dignified expressions. Look at the screen. Zhang Yang was one to pick more, and the other party was the Fishman group who had taken an excessive amount of poison for the second time. Seeing Zhang Yang's relaxed expression, as if he was still holding hands, everyone was shocked, and they all had the same voice in their hearts. Murmured up. How strong is he? Your Majesty, this man is really my Fishman Island's hope. Otoji looked at the figure in the pillar of fire on the screen, and said solemnly to Neptune on the side. Yeah. Neptune nodded with a heavy voice. Although he had heard about Zhang Yang's strength from Bernie's mouth, after seeing Zhang Yang's strength with his own eyes, the hope in his eyes was revealed, and he added to his heart. One sentence. Maybe this man can really help us realize the dream of coexistence on Fishman Island. The hall of the Dragon Palace is already full of maddened people at this time. You are too weak to fight. When Zhang Yang's slightly contemptuous voice came out, the Fishmons were all shocked. Arlong was already slumped to the ground at this moment, and he didn't want to fight again. It was too strong, and there was no chance at all. Is it too weak? Huodi clenched his fists. Although he saw Zhang Yang's strength, he was still unwilling. He glanced around and saw all the Fishmons who had no fighting intent. When he saw that even Arlong was like this, his whole body was burning with anger. When he finally glanced at the fierce medicine in Hachi's hands in the corner behind him, his pupils suddenly widened, the corners of his mouth were raised, and his face was filled with a maddening smile, and he walked towards Hachi step by step. Hodi, why did you go? At one point, when Arlong saw Huodi walking in front of Hachi, his expression was stunned, but the next moment his expression changed, full of anger. Bastard. When Huodi came to Hachi, with a weird smile, he took the thin knife and slashed hard at Hachi. When blood spurted out, Hachi opened his eyes wide and looked at Huodi in disbelief. Watching him take the poison from his hand and stuff it in his mouth, when Hachi fell to the ground was instantly dyed red with blood. Hodi. Everyone, at this moment, discovered what Huodi did, and saw Hachi lying on the ground motionless, and even Zhang Yang's expression turned gloomy when he saw this scene. He didn't expect Huodi to be so mad. Slaughtered his comrades for strength. Arlong is hateful, at least he is not cold-blooded. Seeing what Huodi has done at the moment, when he is burning with anger, he actually bursts with a powerful speed at this moment. When he reaches Huodi, he punches with a powerful impact towards Huodi. The forehead blasted out fiercely, and even bursts of sonic booms spread in the sky. Pong! What? How is that possible? With the sound of a dull collision, the fishmons who were struggling to sit up stared in front of them, looking at the ease when Huodivivi raised his hand and blocked the punch with ease. Brother Arlong, you are too weak. Following Huodi's sneer, he also punched out with a punch. When it landed on Arlong's chest, a strong impact, with a hurricane, made Arlong's chest dent. At the same time, Arlong's figure flew out of the Dragon Palace at a speed that was almost invisible to the naked eye at this moment. After smashing through the walls, he disappeared in front of everyone. The fire of life weakens faster, but the power. Zhang Yang clenched the handle of the knife, his expression dignified. Jahahaha, kid, die. Ignoring the angry gazes of other fishmons towards him, Huodi laughed horribly. The High-Gen group has transformed into a dragon. When the palm suddenly hit the ground, there was a vibration on the ground, and even Zhang Yang's figure began to stumble. Then, a burst of seawater suddenly rose from the ground, and the low roar sounded in an endless stream. At this moment, one after another Jiaolong suddenly emerged from the seawater on the ground, with fierce gleams, with the momentum of breaking the army by riding the wind and waves, and plundering towards Zhang Yang. Do you really think you are so awesome? Did I make you, a dead fish, look down on you? Zhang Yang was also a little angry. This Huodi's brain was like a disease, and then he was looking for trouble again and again. With the anger, Zhang Yang waved the flowing blade in his hand, which had been quiet, and when the flame was manic, Zhang Yang's gloomy voice suddenly came out. Songming. With one knife, the surging flames directly directed these dragons, and the seawater on the ground was all wrapped in it, and the violent rotation was like a huge hurricane soaring into the sky. And as the flowing blade Ruahuo in Zhang Yang's hand waved again, the flamed hurricane suddenly made a huge roar and burst open, and the powerful momentum set off an impact like a ripple, spreading to the surrounding. Everything turned into nothingness. Jiaolong is also, so is the seawater. Who said that water can put out fires? When the temperature of the flame is more terrifying, even water has to be turned into dust. Zhang Yang didn't stop. After Song Ming passed, in this smoke, in an instant, when Huodi was caught off guard, he appeared in front of him, without swinging the knife, without using the ghost way. At this moment, armament was applied to the fist. At that time, a punch hit Huodi directly. This is not over yet. When Huodi was flying backwards, Zhang Yang came behind Huodi in an instant, and armament applied spiritual pressure again, and lifted Huodi directly into the air with one leg. I let you underestimate me, motherfucker. When the voice smashed in the air, Fishman, who was sitting on the ground, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, watching the figure that suddenly disappeared and appeared above Huodi. Zhang Yang's legs slammed heavily on Huodi's chest. In the blink of an eye, Huodi's figure smashed directly to the ground below, and the strong impact kept the ground from breaking. At the same time, he sucked in a breath of cold air, and the shock caused the intermittent voice, too strong. It turns out that he still kept his hand when he fought with us before. What kind of monster is this? Chapter 117 ending. Major Zhang Yang, the old man was late. I saw Arlong lying on the ground and was conscious outside. I also brought him in. In this somewhat quiet atmosphere, Jinbei's figure appeared in front of the entrance of the Dragon Palace, and he threw the figure in his hand to the ground, and an apologetic voice came out instantly. When he saw the gray-haired and bruised fishman sitting on the ground, he kicked Arlong's body severely. Damn, you bastard Arlong, you actually made them all take overdose medicine. After venting fiercely, when Jinbei's eyes swept to Hachi who was lying motionless on the ground in the corner, he was stunned for a moment, feeling faintly that something was wrong. His face gradually darkened, and he quickly rushed to Hachi. Major Zhang Yang. Looking at the shocking wound on Hachi's chest and the extremely weak breathing, a burst of anger burst out from Jinbei's chest and looked at Zhang Yang suddenly. No, Jinbei, you misunderstood, not me. Seeing that Jinbei was about to fight as soon as he disagreed, Zhang Yang hurriedly waved his hand, for fear that Jinbei would be misunderstood. After all, he might use Jinbei in the future. What's the matter? Jinbei frowned, withdrew his gaze, turned his head to look at Das, Joe and the others, and a cold voice suddenly sounded. If it's a lie, look at how the old man will deal with you. Even, Boss Jinbei, no. Looking at Jinbei, who was extremely dangerous at this moment, Jiao swallowed and his voice trembled. We didn't do it. Don't talk nonsense to the old man. Jinbei snorted coldly. Jiao wanted to say something, but Arlong, who was lying on the ground at this time, swallowed blood mixed with minced meat, and his voice came out vaguely. Kill. Kill, that bastard. Who? Jinbei looked at Arlong with a blank expression. Hoodie, that bastard killed Hachi. When Arlong's voice entered Jinbei's mind, Jinbei's expression changed and he looked at the other fishman. Before Jinbei could speak, they all nodded hurriedly. Jinbei, Hachi still has breath. Don't delay any longer. Take him out to rescue quickly. I'm afraid it will be too late. Huodi will leave it to me. I will not let him continue to live. Seeing Jinbei ready to start, Zhang Yang stopped him immediately. Then I'll leave it to you, Major Zhang Yang. Jinbei glanced at Hachi, nodded after a moment of silence, gave Zhang Yang a deep look, then hugged Hachi and rushed out of the Dragon Palace. You dead fish, what are you pretending to be? An attack of that level just now won't kill you. Looking at the dark shadow in the rising dust mist, Zhang Yang said coldly, you fish dregs, I don't plan to play with you anymore, I'll send you on your way. The 90 black coffins of destruction. The index finger and the straight finger of the right hand were raised simultaneously. When the spiritual power in the body was revealed, Zhang Yang pointed forward. When Huodi's figure was about to move, 4 huge black barriers directly wrapped his figure. The black cuboid is like a coffin. Black spears morphed out from around the black coffin, stabbing in almost at the same time from all angles, followed by a scream. First style slash. When he noticed that Huodi still had aura, Zhang Yang Liuran slashed down with a slash of flame, and a crack appeared on the black coffin at the next moment. Boom. The black coffin formed by spiritual power suddenly exploded at this time. When it came out, Huodi's screams were suddenly drowned out, and the breath also dissipated. The sun was setting and it was already dusk, and the Marineford seemed to be plated with a layer of carmine red with a faint golden light, which looked unique. However, the atmosphere in Marineford was extremely depressing at this time. Outside the meeting room, 2 Commodore-level Marines were guarding. Although they were Commodores, both of them were dignified and nervous at this moment. On the handle. Marshal, what's the matter? You have called us in such a hurry. The long table in the conference room was filled with characters above Vice Admiral. They looked at each other. The tense atmosphere filled the room. Sengoku looked at Kong solemnly. I'm afraid that brat Zhang Yang has caused some trouble again, haha. Even in such an atmosphere, Garp ate as much as he should, grabbed a handful of senbei and stuffed it into his mouth, and laughed when there was a crackling sound in his mouth. But who knew Garp's joking words? Kong nodded. Yes, Zhang Yang privately represented Marine on Fishman Island and formed an alliance contract with the royal family there. Hearing this, the expressions of everyone present changed, and they all knew the seriousness of the matter, but in this serious atmosphere, Garp's untimely laughter came. Haha, it really is that kid. But in the next moment, Garp seemed to have come to his senses, stood up suddenly, slapped the table with his big hand, and looked shocked. With Fishman Island. Alliance contract. And according to reports, in order to make the contract stronger, Zhang Yang is also engaged to the worker princess of Fishman Island. Ha 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 ha. Unexpectedly, under Kong's serious words, Garp laughed and beat the table with his fists, and even burst into tears. This is really only that kid can do it. Garp. Sengoku glared at Garp and said solemnly after seeing Garp quiet down, we Marine can still manage the last time in the illegal zone, but the alliance with Fishman Island is no longer within our jurisdiction. Only if the world government agrees. Quote. Oops, will the world government agree to this? Kizaru didn't wake up with a look on his face, and said slowly. Zephyr crossed his arms. Has the news been blocked? When we Marine knew about it, the news had already spread first, and it won't be long before it spread to the 4 seas, including the New World. Kong shook his head and said solemnly, and the world government is so close to Fishman Island, the news might have reached their ears as soon as possible. Zhang Yang has made a big mistake this time. Chapter 118 Whitebeard's Action. Damn, what the hell is Marine doing to ally with Fishman Island? Is it against us Tenryubito? And also engaged to the mermaid princess of the royal family of Fishman Island? That's abominable. Absolutely do not allow this to happen. The Holy Land, Mariagio, was not as peaceful as usual at this time. There was a constant noise and dissatisfaction in the streets, and it was still the same in a hall in a huge castle. In the hall, there are 4 figures in black suits, and an old man in a white Taoist uniform who is wiping a long sword. This time Gorosei, 5 elders gathered together, apparently because of Zhang Yang's privately representing Marine and Fishman Island. Although they know the reason for the gathering, no one knows what happened during this time, only that after the discussion, the Gorosei, 5 elders called government officials and asked them to prepare a news report to the world, after which Gorosei, 5 elders had a chat with world government chief scientist Vegapunk. At this time, a membrane-coated world government ship slowly sank towards Fishman Island. On the sea in a certain area of the New World, a huge ship was sailing slowly, and on the railing there was a black bottom, a crescent-shaped beard-white skull and a cross row of skeletons. Daddy, drink less wine, today's paper. On the deck of this ship, a large number of pirates are bathing in the sun, talking to each other. One of them has a golden punk head, a man with a dagger on his waist and a tattoo on his chest, holding a man who has just fallen from the sky. A newspaper that fell, walked to the very center of the deck, and handed it to the man in front of him. This man is very big and strong, with a white beard under his nose that curves upwards in the shape of a crescent moon, and a 3-meter-long guandao beside the chair. He is Whitebeard, known as the strongest man in the world. Whitebeard sat on the chair, put down the extra-large wine glass in his hand, took the newspaper, and read it carefully, frowning from time to time, and from time to time there was a "goo-la-la-la" laughter. Marco, Marine came out with a funny kid who plucked my flag on Fishman Island, ooh much. Whitebeard laughed and threw the newspaper to the man named Marco, then picked up the glass and took a sip. When did Marine intervene in Fishman Island? Marco was stunned for a moment, his eyelids drooping slightly to look at the newspaper, but after a while, his expression became solemn. Major Marine privately represents Marine to form an alliance with Fishman Island. Marine's future hope, the messenger of justice. I actually defeated a group of fishmen who took the poison with my own strength. This strength is not weak. Dad, do you know who this Zhang Yang is? Whitebeard said with a big laugh. Gee la la la, I'm too lazy to worry about it. Anyway, it suits my appetite, it's a different Marine. Marco, you and Vista are going to teach this kid a lesson, although I don't object to his actions, but tearing up the flag of my Whitebeard pirates, if you don't say anything, I'm afraid those guys will think I'm not angry. Marco was taken aback and said, do you want to go now? Go now. Whitebeard seemed to remember something, and suddenly said, by the way, investigate that kid to see who he is. Gee la la la, and then ask if you are interested in getting on my boat. Dad, it's Major Marine. You are no different from slapping Marine's face naked. Marco shrugged and went to the vista that Whitebeard was talking about. The sea is going to be restless again, I don't know what the world government is doing. Whitebeard looked at the calm sea with a dignified expression. 2 days have passed since Huodi's death. Those fishmen who participated in the treason were all put in prison, but Hachi was an exception, not only because he had been in a coma, but also because the royal family was able to make it in time this time. Discovering the conspiracy of the rebel forces and making a response strategy depends entirely on Hachi's whistleblower, or abandoning the secret. However, because Hachi deliberately wanted the royal family to hide it. Only a few people knew about it. Zhang Yang is now well known on Fishman Island when the world government made it clear in the newspaper news that it agreed to consider an alliance with Fishman Island. When I got the news for the first time, the happiest one was Princess Otoji, who held a grand banquet directly on Fishman Island, and Zhang Yang, the protagonist, was naturally a must-attend candidate. Come, Major Zhang Yang, have a drink. This time the world government agreed to consider forming a contract with our Fishman Island, thanks to Major Zhang Yang. When are you going to marry Princess Shirahoshi? At the banquet, whether they knew each other or not, they all leaned towards Zhang Yang with a glass of wine, surrounded Zhang Yang in the middle, and Yiji accompanied Nipton. With a smile, Yiji said, "Your Majesty, my concubine has finally waited for this day. Thanks to your persistence, Atsuki." Nipton took the wine glass and touched Yiji, and after drinking it, he put down the wine glass, patted both hands, and said loudly, "Everyone, please stop for a while, and I will say something." The marriage between Shirahoshi and Major Zhang Yang was cancelled. As soon as these words came out, everyone was a little surprised, and some even looked directly at Zhang Yang and asked, "Major Zhang Yang, what happened to you and Princess Shirahoshi?" "It's alright, the engagement was just to lure snakes out of their holes. After all, mermaids and humans intermarry. You are actually quite concerned, and Princess Shirahoshi is still young, so it's not too late to talk about some things later." Zhang Yang shrugged. In fact, he knew why the engagement was cancelled. Just yesterday, the commissioner sent by the world government personally sent a message to the royal family. If you want the world government to form an alliance with Fishman Island, it must be cancelled. The engagement of the mermaid princess and Major Zhang Yang. Quote. In fact, Zhang Yang was deeply shocked that the world government agreed to form an alliance with it, but after thinking about it, he couldn't think of a reason. Maybe the Gorosei, 5 elders could figure it out. Chapter 119. Strange Shushu to coax the little girl. Major Bernie, are you having fun? Zhang Yang walked up to Bernie with a glass of wine, took the initiative to have a glass with him, and said, "I am going to leave for the world today." Major Zhang Yang. Bernie got up and saluted, then smiled. The beauty of Fishman Island is truly breathtaking, and the world government has agreed to consider forming an alliance with it. I'm afraid it won't be long before Fishman Island can become a tourist treasure. Well, humans and Fishman Island can gradually coexist peacefully. The decision you made at the beginning was correct. If Marine or even the world government intervened at the time, I'm afraid this situation would not be the case now. Zhang Yang drank the wine in the glass and smiled at Bernie. Thank you again, Major Bernie. Stand by what you think is right, this is justice. Bernie was stunned for a moment, guessing that Zhang Yang should have found out at the time that he took out the phone bug but didn't dial the situation. Vivi sighed and glanced over the happy smiling faces of the fish monks at the banquet. Bernie sighed in his heart. Writing. Fortunately, I didn't get through. Seeing Zhang Yang's back disappearing into the crowd, the last words left by Zhang Yang echoed in his ears. Bernie's eyes were a bit complicated, he didn't know what he was thinking, and after a while, he murmured softly like a mosquito. To himself, maybe, this man can really become the Marine Marshal and give Marine a real justice. The Minister of the Right. Walking into the Dragon Palace, and before a certain gate, Zhang Yang nodded to the Minister right at the door. The Minister right saw Zhang Yang and said with a smile, "Go in quickly, Princess Shirahoshi is waiting in a hurry, and runs from time to time. Come out and ask me if you are here." Isho, who was embarrassed by the publicity, then gently pushed in the door and saw the backs of the huge Shirahoshi and the cute shark Megalo, and at the same time, Shirahoshi's self-talk was also heard. "Megalo, is Brother Zhang Yang really leaving? You said, will Brother Zhang Yang come back to see me in the future? I heard from my mother before that Brother Zhang Yang and I are already engaged, so can't we be together like a mother and a father? But, why the marriage was cancelled again, is it because Brother Zhang Yang doesn't want Shirahoshi anymore?" As he was talking, Shirahoshi's weak cry came from the room, and at the same time, Doubta's tears kept hitting the ground, and there was a sound of beating and beating. Fool, why did brother Jongyang not want Shirahoshi? With a gentle touch on his forehead and a familiar voice in his ear, Shirahoshi opened his big eyes full of tears, and when he saw Jongyang appearing in front of him, suspended in midair, Shirahoshi stopped originally. The crying got worse again. Brother Jongyang and Shirahoshi's wedding are all over. Obviously I don't like Shirahoshi anymore. Ooh, brother Jongyang doesn't want Shirahoshi anymore. Looking at Shirahoshi, who is huge but only 4 years old, Jongyang has a big head. He really doesn't know how to explain it, but at a certain moment, Jongyang's eyes flashed, and he said in frustration, Shirahoshi, you want to make brother Jongyang hurt his heart. Shirahoshi stopped crying immediately, like a child who did something wrong, and said weakly in a panic, that's not the case, Shirahoshi, don't make your brother sad and sad. Although the wedding of Shirahoshi and brother Jongyang has been cancelled, did Shirahoshi forget? Brother Jongyang and you are already engaged, so brother Jongyang will not want Shirahoshi. Cough. When he said these words, Jongyang's old face was a little hot, and he felt like a strange slut deceived a little lowly. He coughed dryly, and showed a smile that was very gentle to him. Really? Shirahoshi opened his eyes wide and covered with water mist, and stared at Jongyang with his big, crystal clear eyes. Don't you believe what brother Jongyang said? Jongyang said deliberately with a straight face. No, I believe brother Jongyang. Hearing this, Jongyang couldn't help but murmured in his heart, sure enough, the little girl is really deceiving. Okay, Shirahoshi, can you promise brother Jongyang one thing? Shirahoshi replied innocently, brother Jongyang, you said, Shirahoshi will agree. Promise brother Jongyang, no matter what happens, don't be angry, sad, if Shirahoshi doesn't do it, brother Jongyang will never ignore Shirahoshi. Shirahoshi has the power of one of the 3 ancient weapons, Sea King Poseidon, has been considered by Jongyang to tell Neptune and Otoji secretly again and again. Jongyang told them that although this power has not yet awakened, if Shirahoshi is particularly sad or hurt or angry, once his emotions have too many twists and turns, then it is possible to activate the power of Sea King Poseidon, and then others will know about it. Shirahoshi is in danger. Although Yiji and Neptune were shocked and a little bit incredulous, they still obeyed Jongyang's instructions, and Jongyang still felt uneasy. Before leaving, Jongyang also went to see Hachi. Now Hachi is out of danger, but he is still very weak and has been taken care of by Jinbei. Jinbei, why haven't I seen Tiger this time? At the end, Jongyang also raised his doubts. He really wanted to see who the fishman, whom Jinbei, one of the future kings, Shichibukai, and Arlong, respected as the eldest brother was one of the purposes of coming to Fishman Island. This is it. Brother Jongyang, do you know big brother Tai? At Jongyang's repeated request, he asked Jinbei to change his name so that he could get closer. Jinbei looked at Jongyang for a moment, and then said with a look of longing, Brother Tai, I am afraid that he is still going around the world somewhere. Outstanding adventurer and traveler. After Jongyang left here and Jinbei, he didn't say goodbye too much, and even left Fishman Island in a hurry. Not only because of the scene that appeared in the crystal ball, but also because of what the world government did not quite right this time. The two came together to create a strange and depressing atmosphere, making Jongyang uneasy. Can't wait to set out in a new world and find a way to become stronger. Chapter 120 Attacked. While the world is still in shock over Jongyang's actions on Fishman Island, there is a hidden exit in the Holy Land Maria Jo. On this day, a small wooden boat sailed out of it. There was a black-robed figure on the boat, with his feet on wooden sandals, a long knife with a sheath leaning on his shoulders, and he could vaguely see him wearing a pair of glasses. On the boundless sea, this small wooden boat is like a small boat, giving people a danger that the boat may capsize at any time. Come over. The black-robed figure sitting on the boat has remained motionless since boarding the boat, and just when the huge waves were about to hit, he did not even see the movement of the black-robed figure drawing his sword, and in a blink of an eye, it was already cut off. The figure in the black robe slowly retracted the long sword into the scabbard, and at this moment, there was a crack in the middle of the huge wave in front of him. Only a small boat passed, and when the small wooden boat passed slowly, the two huge waves that were separated fell down. This scene, except for the fearful sea kings hidden in the sea, no one knows. Under the blue sky, on the endless calm sea, a warship is slowly sailing forward. Beside the ship, there is a figure in casual clothes, whose hair is blown by the sea breeze, facing the sea. Major Zhang Yang, you are getting bolder and bolder. Vasek Rear Admiral, who looked a little illusory, stood beside Zhang Yang with a notebook, and when he looked at the man beside him, there was shock in his eyes. It's not enough, I still want to overthrow the world government. Zhang Yang shrugged, his tone was a bit joking, but in Zhang Yang's heart, he was brooding about one thing, which was naturally the blank 100 years. Although there is no direct explanation in the original work, some pirate fans have basically speculated that it appeared. However, speculation is still just conjecture, and it is true and false. If Zhang Yang really found any clues and the like, and found the truth of the facts, if it was really the ugly past of the Gorosei, 5 elders or even the world government, Zhang Yang might really want to erase the old and build the new, but these are for later. Major Zhang Yang, you can't talk nonsense like this. If someone with ulterior motives hears it, even if it is you, if you are out of the control of the world government, you will inevitably have to get rid of it. Although it could be seen that Zhang Yang was joking, Vasek felt that it was necessary to seriously remind Zhang Yang. Ha ha. Zhang Yang couldn't help issue when he saw Vasek's seriousness, but the next moment he seemed to remember something. His laughter stopped in the summer, frowned, and when he looked at Vask on the side, he said solemnly, "What did you just say?" I said, if someone with ulterior motives hears this kind of thing, even if it is Major Zhang Yang with great potential, the world government will get rid of you. Vas was taken aback for a moment, although he didn't understand what happened to Zhang Yang, he repeated it. Zhang Yang immediately retorted, "No, there is one more sentence. Well, if you get out of the control of the world government, it will inevitably get rid of you." After pondering for a while, Vas said solemnly, but after thinking about it, he still didn't understand, so he asked the doubts in his heart, "Major Zhang Yang, is there a problem with these two sentences?" Zhang Yang did not answer Vasek. In the silence, he vaguely felt that he had caught something, and began to think hard. At a certain moment, Zhang Yang suddenly woke up, his forehead was covered in cold sweat, he swallowed, and hesitantly muttered in his heart. Could it be that the world government wants to get rid of me, and agrees to consider forming an alliance with Fishman Island, just to make it clear? The more he thought about Zhang Yang, the more frightened he felt, especially when he thought of his corpse that was divided into two in the crystal ball. An inexplicable fear instantly ran through his body. Who is it? It's absolutely impossible to be someone from Marine, and if it's the world government, then who will come out? Gorosei, 5 elders. Zhang Yang bit his lip and resisted the idea of speculating for no reason. At this moment, he finally heard Vask's anxious voice. "Major Zhang Yang, what's the matter with you?" Wiping the cold sweat off his forehead, Zhang Yang showed a strong smile. "No, it's fine. You said it was okay, just now your face was pale and your expression was extremely frightened." Vask looked at the fear in Zhang Yang's eyes just now, and he was stunned. He didn't think anything could threaten this small-looking man. Then why is it? He faintly felt that something important must have happened, and even threatened Zhang Yang's life and death. Vask said solemnly, "Major Zhang Yang, what happened? Don't think about it, it's all right." When Zhang Yang's words stopped in the summer, his face changed, and he felt that two powerful spiritual pressures were constantly approaching him. Who? Is it possible that the world government sent me to get rid of me? But even if these two spiritual pressures are coming closer, powerful, but together they are only comparable to the original Akainu. The world government must know that I killed Akainu. These two spiritual pressure fluctuations are also the first time I have seen So, who are these two? With his brows furrowed, he swept to an island next to him, and shouted loudly, "Major Bernie, get to the shore." Yes. Bernie was a little dazed, but it was his duty as a soldier to obey orders. He didn't ask why. He took the helm and leaned towards the island next to him. The warship just landed, and Zhang Yang was about to jump directly from the deck to the ground, but just after jumping off, when he was still in the process of falling in midair, Zhang Yang's face suddenly changed, and when he turned his head, he only felt a mixture of yellow and blue. Flames appeared in sight. Pung! The next moment, Zhang Yang felt as if he had been hit hard on his waist. Under the strong impact, the whole person was like a kite with a broken string, smashing straight towards the ground in the distance, and when a sound was made, smoke lingered. "Marco, did you hit a little harder? It's really not a good idea to take advantage of people's unpreparedness,"